Hello everyone, welcome to Frightening Tallis. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from, and if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. They say that blood is thicker than water, but when it comes to murder, family ties can easily become as twisted as the crime itself. On August 7, 39 years ago, an entire family was found brutally murdered in their farmhouse. Each member had been shot multiple times, leaving no one behind except one Jeremy Bamber. The only survivor claimed that his mentally ill sister had gone berserk, killing everyone including her own children before turning the gun on herself. His sister did struggle with schizophrenia. She had been hospitalized before and once claimed her children were the devil's offspring. She even had suicidal thoughts. But then at the funeral, Jeremy was spotted cracking jokes, grinning to himself and making comments about finally being in charge. Was this just his way of coping, or was there something darker hiding behind that smile, and was his sister really the killer, or was she just an easy scapegoat? Let's get to the bottom of this and uncover the truth behind the White House farm murders. The Bamber family was once considered the most picture-perfect family. June and Neville Bamber, the parents, got married in 1949 in a Christian church. Both were deeply religious, with June being especially devout. On the other hand, Neville was known as a strong, manly man, easygoing, down to earth and well liked in their community. He was highly respected, often seen as the backbone of the village. Additionally, Neville loved a good party while June was quieter and more reserved, making them the perfect pair. But June's devotion to her faith was intense. She practically lived and breathed religion. After they married, June and Neville longed to have children but soon discovered they couldn't conceive, so they decided to adopt and welcome two young children, a boy and a girl, into their home. Though not biologically related, these children quickly became part of their loving family. They named their children Sheila and Jeremy. At first, the family lived in a small house, but as the kids grew, they decided they needed more space, so they moved into a larger home that had once belonged to June's father. This new place was quite impressive, over 300 acres of land and a classic red brick farmhouse with white trim. It was the kind of house that looked straight out of a picture book, and it was known in the area as White House Farm. The Bamber family also owned a business called OC Road Campsites. In short, the members were financially well off. They had their farmhouse, a flat in London, and a caravan site. Today's video is sponsored by Aura, and it's a really important time to be talking about them because hackers may have stolen the social security numbers of every American. Over 2.9 billion records were stolen from National Public Data, which offers personal information to employers, private investigators, staffing agencies, and others doing background checks. These stolen records include a person's full name, address, date of birth, social security number, and phone number, along with alternate names and birth date. And members of the hacker group have reportedly released this information for free online. If you weren't taking precautions with your personal information online before, this should be a huge wake-up call. You've never been more vulnerable online than you are right now, but I'm not too worried about it because I use Aura. Aura alerts me if they find my phone number, email, or social security number on the dark web. They're going to let me know fast if anyone tries to use this information to access my credit or bank accounts. They give me up to $5 million in identity theft insurance should the worst case scenario happen. They also provide a bunch of other features to keep you safe online, all inside one app. You can go to my link aura.com/into-the-deep to try 14 days for free. That will be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data is exposed. I highly recommend you do this right now, because not only is National Public Data not going to do anything to help you, they probably aren't even going to face any Repercussions for this leak: I'm not leaving myself and my family vulnerable to data breaches, and if you don't want to either, you can go to orura.com/into-the-deep to try 2 weeks for free. So June and Neville wanted nothing but the best for Sheila and Jeremy as they grew up. They sent Sheila to several private schools to ensure she got the best education possible. After high school, Sheila went on to secretarial school to become a secretary. Following the path her parents believed would secure her future, Jeremy also went to private school, but he had a lot of behavioral issues. He had a knack for causing trouble and wasn't exactly the most popular kid. In fact, his family struggled with his wild antics, including some pretty extreme pranks. One of his favorites was to scare his mother, who had a deep fear of rats. Jeremy would hide baby rats in his pocket and force her to reach in, making her touch them. He'd also zoom around her on his bike, circling so fast it made her dizzy. Because of this, his parents hoped that boarding school might straighten him out, but instead Jeremy faced more challenges. He basically felt isolated, bullied by both students and teachers, and was mocked for being adopted. The bullying was so intense that rumors of possible abuse at the school surfaced, but after enduring these tough times, Jeremy finally graduated and headed to college. And after graduating in 1982, he returned home, where his parents made sure he was well taken care of. They set him up with a charming cottage just down the road from White House Farm, a new car, and a slice of their business. They even gave him an 8% share in the campsite business, with the expectation that he would work either at the farm or for the company. To the outside world, the Bamber family seemed like the epitome of perfection. Bright kids, a beautiful home, devoted Christian values, and a thriving business. They appeared to have it all together. But in reality, June had a tough time with depression. In 1955 and again in 1958, she ended up in a psychiatric hospital. Back then, people didn't understand mental health issues very well. June was treated with electroshock therapy, where tiny electric currents are sent through the brain to cause a brief seizure. This was supposed to help reset the brain, but today it's used only in extreme cases and is still a bit controversial. Interestingly, June's depression was partly because of her strained relationship with her kids. Now, remember, she was very religious, seeing everything as a battle between good and evil. If someone didn't share her beliefs, she would instantly think they were bad, and June was upset with Sheila, who had been trying to make it as a model, and Jeremy, who was secretly growing cannabis on the farm. Her strict religious values seemed to push her kids further away. The tension between June and Sheila was especially intense. June even called Sheila the devil's child after Sheila got pregnant at 17. Despite being normally against abortion, June pushed for it to protect their family's reputation. This decision drove a huge wedge between them, leaving Sheila feeling deeply betrayed and never able to trust her mother again. In a twist of fate, Sheila actually married the man she'd originally gotten pregnant by, Colin, in May 1977. They wanted to start a family right away, and after a few attempts they had twin boys, Daniel and Nicholas. But just 5 months after the babies were born, Sheila discovered that Colin had been cheating on her throughout their marriage. Their relationship fell apart, and Sheila was left heartbroken and deeply depressed. By 1983, Sheila's mental health had deteriorated so much that she went to see Dr. Hugh Ferguson, the same doctor who had treated her mother. Dr. Ferguson admitted her to a psychiatric hospital, where Sheila was initially diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. However, after further evaluation, Dr. Ferguson changed the diagnosis to paranoid schizophrenia, and Sheila's struggles mirrored her mother's. She began calling her children the devil's children, and even expressed terrifying thoughts of harming them because she believed they were possessed. She also claimed she could make her kids harm others. Despite these alarming signs, Sheila was eventually released from the hospital in September 1983 and was put on antipsychotic medication. She continued to see Dr. Ferguson regularly. Unfortunately, she had another psychotic episode and ended up back in the hospital for about a month. During the stay it was decided that her children should be removed from her care due to her ongoing mental health issues. When I first saw Sheila Caffel, I diagnosed that she was in a state of acute psychosis and had been so for about 2 weeks. It was evident that she had been depressed and unconfident for the previous 18 months and had an increasing sensitivity about other people. The history of her case was of a slow onset leading to an acute breakdown, inferring a poor outlook. I arranged for Sheila to be admitted to St. Andrew's Hospital, Northampton on August 4, 1983. During her treatment I found that Sheila had bizarre delusions about possession by the devil and complex ideas about having sex with her twin sons. She thought her sons would seduce her and saw evil in both of them. In particular, she thought her son Nicholas was becoming a woman hater and was a potential murderer. She said she felt as if she was caught up in a coven of evil. These feelings appeared to be involved with her relationship with her adoptive mother and her standards of good and evil. These feelings she expressed were clear symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia. Sheila did not give any impression that she was violent or potentially violent. She was bewildered. They were sent to live with their father, but on August 4, 1985, Sheila took her sons to visit her parents and Jeremy at the farm. The kids were thrilled to see their grandparents, and Sheila was eager to reconnect with her family even though there was still some tension with her mother. The family was happy and excited to see each other on August 6. 2 days later they all gathered for a family dinner: Jeremy, Sheila, the twins and their parents Neville and June. During the dinner, Neville and June suggested that Sheila consider putting the boys into daytime foster care. It's unclear whether they meant actual foster care or just daycare, but Sheila was upset by the suggestion. Jeremy noted that Sheila seemed offended and uncomfortable, possibly feeling like they doubted her ability to care for the children. During the day after dinner around 9:30 p.m. Jeremy headed back to his cottage down the road. Around the same time the farm secretary Barbara called Neville. She noticed that Neville seemed preoccupied and agitated, and it sounded like there might have been an argument happening in the house. Neville even abruptly hung up on Barbara, which was very unusual for him as he was normally very polite. About 30 minutes later June's sister Pamela called. During their conversation Sheila also spoke with Pamela, but Pamela noticed that Sheila seemed a bit off. Fast forward to the early hours of August 7 around 3:30 a.m. Jeremy allegedly received a call from his father Neville saying that Sheila had gone wild with a gun. The call suddenly cut off, prompting Jeremy to call the police. However, instead of dialing emergency dispatch, he called the non-emergency number my father's phone from White House Farm, and he sounded really frightened. He says, "My sister's gone crazy and she's got a gun." When Jeremy finally reached the police, they told him to head to the farm and that they would meet him there. However, as they drove, the officers noticed that Jeremy was driving unusually slowly. Given the urgency of the situation, his father had reported that Sheila had gone wild with a gun. This slow pace was strange. By around 5:00 a.m. everyone arrived at the house. Instead of going inside immediately, the police chose to wait outside for 2 hours. They even used a megaphone to shout into the house asking if anyone was there, but received no response. The only sound was a dog barking. The reason for this delay was unusual and unexplained. On the other hand, Jeremy spoke with the police outside, updating them on the family dinner, the phone call from his dad, and the upset Sheila had shown about the suggestion of foster care. He also mentioned Sheila's mental illness. At the last minute, Jeremy told the police he had left his gun at his parents' house loaded and sitting on the counter. Given the potential family conflict, the loaded gun, and Sheila's mental state, the police began to piece together a troubling picture. It wasn't until 7:54 a.m. that they finally entered the house, where they discovered the bodies of Sheila, her 2 boys, and her parents Neville and June. Sheila and the twins were upstairs while Neville was downstairs in The kitchen Neville found slumped over in his pajamas had been shot 8 times, 6 of those in the face. It was clear he had fought back as there were numerous defense wounds on his body. Sheila was found in the master bedroom and the boys, Daniel and Nicholas, were in their beds. June had been shot 7 times, Sheila 3 times, Daniel 5 times and Nicholas 3 times. The scene was a bloody mess and the phone was found off the hook when Jeremy was informed he had a severe reaction. He was reportedly hysterical, screaming, crying and even throwing up. The police quickly concluded that Sheila, with her mental illness, had killed her family before turning the gun on herself. This theory was soon spread by the media, painting Sheila as the culprit due to her unstable mental state. However, some aspects of the case were puzzling. Sheila had been shot 3 times, which was unusual. The gun was found on her, pointing in the direction of her face. The medical examiner noted that it's possible to shoot yourself multiple times while still being conscious enough to pull the trigger again, but then again the handling of the crime scene was notably poor. The police burned the bedding and carpet to remove the blood, an action that destroyed potential evidence. They also mishandled the gun, with the detective picking it up barehanded, ignoring the importance of preserving DNA and other fingerprints. Additionally, a carving in Sheila's room that read "I hate it here" was found, but it was never determined when it was made, whether that day or much earlier, so it was quickly determined that Sheila was the problem and the culprit. 3 days after the murders, Jeremy inherited White House Farm along with the family businesses. With his parents gone, he was free from their strict religious rules and could do as he pleased, including continuing his cannabis farming. A few days after the murders, the family held a funeral. Jeremy's behavior at the event drew some raised eyebrows. Instead of a quiet mourning, he was overly dramatic, loud sobs, screaming and generally making a scene. Friends and family started to notice something strange after the service. When everyone was leaving, some relatives caught Jeremy with a wide grin on his face as he wiped away his tears. It seemed like he had switched from sobbing to smiling as soon as he thought no one was watching. The media coverage only added to the oddness. Jeremy made a big show of collapsing to the ground and needed help from his girlfriend to get up, but as soon as the cameras were off, he snapped out of his dramatic act. People noticed he was switching between being overly emotional and then acting completely normal. During the wake, he made bizarre comments like how he was now the boss and talked about his plans with his girlfriend in a disturbingly casual way, which was unsettling given the circumstances. Meanwhile, the police tested the gun found at the scene for fingerprints. They discovered both Sheila's and Jeremy's prints on it. Jeremy explained this by saying the gun was his and that he had been handling it earlier that day for a planned rabbit hunt, though he never got around to going out soon after. While Jeremy was settling into the house, one of his cousins found a gun silencer hidden in a cupboard in the family office. This was a significant discovery because if Sheila had used the silencer, it would have been impossible for her to shoot herself in the way described. The silencer was missing from the rifle when it was found, raising further suspicions about Jeremy's involvement with the silencer attached. The long gun became too unwieldy and lengthy for Sheila to physically maneuver into a position under her chin to shoot herself, making it nearly impossible for her to have committed the act on her own. When the silencer was examined, investigators found a small spot of blood on it. It was sticky and strange, so they sent it to forensics. While they couldn't determine whose blood it was, they confirmed it wasn't Jeremy's and it could belong to any of the victims. This meant the silencer was likely used during the murders, making it impossible for Sheila to have committed the act herself. The fact that the silencer was later found in the gun cupboard was crucial for the prosecution, as Sheila would have had no reason to return it to the cupboard before taking her own life. Jeremy's girlfriend Julie, who he had been with since 1983, received a call from him on the day of the murders. He mentioned something was wrong but didn't give details and abruptly hung up. A few hours later, Julie found out about the murders, Jeremy's call and Sudden disconnection raised more suspicion about his involvement. About a month after the murders, Jeremy and Julie's relationship started to crumble. Julie grew increasingly suspicious of Jeremy, constantly questioning his statements about his family's deaths and poking holes in his stories. Their arguments escalated, with Julie even attempting to smother him with a pillow. During one heated fight, things began to go completely sour when Julie discovered Jeremy's infidelity, pushing her to the breaking point. Furious, she physically attacked him and then went to the police, expressing her concerns that Jeremy might be responsible for the Bamber family murders. She revealed Jeremy's shady past, including a previous scheme where he staged a break-in at his family's business to steal money, which he claimed was meant to highlight their need for better security. Julie also shared that Jeremy often voiced frustration with his family, feeling they were overly controlling and critical of his choices. He reportedly believed Sheila was a bad mother and that the children would turn out disturbed. Julie suspected Jeremy's motive was greed, thinking he wanted more money despite the significant amount his family had already provided. According to Julie, Jeremy's parents had recently made a will dividing their estate equally between him and his sister Sheila. However, Jeremy was dissatisfied with this arrangement and wanted the entire inheritance for himself. Julie claimed that Jeremy intended to eliminate his whole family in one go, ensuring no one was left to share the inheritance. He allegedly discussed various methods, including burning down their house, drugging them with sleeping pills, or shooting them to death. Jeremy reportedly believed it would be easy to blame Sheila due to her schizophrenia, positioning himself as the grieving victim. Julie also recounted a chilling conversation where Jeremy called her after a family dinner, expressing his frustration and stating it's tonight or never. Later at 3 a.m. he allegedly called her again, saying everything's going well, something's gone wrong at the farm, love you, talk to you later. The night of the murders, when they were outside the house, Jeremy reportedly whispered to Julie, I should have been an actor. After she questioned his involvement, Julie's account further escalated when she claimed Jeremy confessed that the family plumber had been hired to carry out the murders, although this was quickly disproven as the plumber had a solid alibi. The police, however, wasted no time in arresting Jeremy, whose alibi didn't hold up. After landing in jail, he bailed himself out and hightailed it to Amsterdam, where he wasted no time selling off his family's belongings, even going so far as to try to sell nude photos of his own sister to a tabloid. But his luck ran out when he returned to town on September 29 and was immediately arrested when the trial kicked off on October 3, 1986. The prosecution painted a damning picture of Jeremy, arguing that he orchestrated the murders and used Sheila as his scapegoat. They highlighted the defensive wounds on his father Neville, suggesting he had fought someone stronger than Sheila. Likely Jeremy. The defense, on the other hand, tried to shift the blame back to Sheila, citing her mental health struggles, but the evidence against Jeremy was too compelling. After just 9 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jeremy guilty, sentencing him to 5 life terms with no chance of parole yet. This case still stirs debate today. Some people believe Sheila was the real perpetrator, while others think Jeremy's ex-girlfriend Julie fabricated her story to get back at him, and through it all, Jeremy continues to proclaim his innocence. Due to Jeremy's conviction, the estate was passed to his cousins instead. One cousin moved into White House Farm, and together with others they acquired full ownership of the caravan site and other properties. Jeremy claimed that his family had framed him, a claim one of the cousins dismissed in 2010 as an absolute load of pitiful story. 2 Australians all over the country are just shocked, saddened, and devastated about what has happened in a suburban street up in suburban Queensland. Hannah Clark seemed to have it all: a loving family, 3 beautiful children, and a passion for fitness, but behind closed doors her life was a nightmare. In February 2020 her life and The lives of her young children were taken away by the man who was supposed to protect them. You can't comprehend it. That's the unfortunate thing is, we've always asked the question why. That's why we said why. Who does that to their kids? Take away their laughter, their games, their future. So Rowan, we're not going to take you to the watch yet. He could have been arrested. Instead, police let Rowan Baxter go. The 42-year-old had just breached his domestic violence order and assaulted his unarmed wife, but he wasn't initially charged over the attack, so was served a future court date. We won't be objecting to bail or anything like that. Less than 3 weeks later, he killed Miss Clark and their 3 children. Hannah Clark was born on September 8, 1988 in Brisbane, Australia, to Sue and Lloyd Clark. She had a younger brother, Nathaniel, who everyone called Nat. Hannah adored him, and from the start she took on a motherly role. Even though they were only a couple of years apart, Hannah was full of life. She was always buzzing with energy and loved being the center of attention. She played sports all through her school years and was even the school captain in college. As she moved through college, she developed a real passion for CrossFit, which led her to spend sometimes hours at the gym. It was there in 2008 that she met Rowan Baxter. Rowan had just moved to Australia from New Zealand with his wife and young son. At the time, Hannah was only 20 years old, while Rowan was 31. After the two met during the boxing class, it didn't take long for Hannah to start falling for him. She decided to tell her parents about Rowan, but the situation was far from ideal. When Hannah told her parents about him, they weren't thrilled. Sue Clark, Hannah's mother, never trusted Baxter. She had a strong mother's instinct that told her something was off about him. She found him smug and cocky, plus the fact that he was 11 years older than her daughter, who had just barely left her teen years, made her even more uneasy. Rowan wasn't known for his smarts. He famously couldn't remember his 4-digit bank PIN and failed to register his car because no one told him he had to. He was obsessed with going to the gym and his physical appearance. He had large muscles that weren't entirely the result of hard work, as he used steroids to bulk up. Unlike Hannah, who built a successful career as a personal trainer with clients who loved her, Rowan struggled to keep clients. His short temper, which is a side effect of steroid use, often drove them away just as quickly as they signed up. As a result, Rowan cycled through a lot of gyms, as no gym wanted a personal trainer who made their clients uncomfortable or unhappy, and certainly no gym would keep a trainer who insulted clients on social media, which is exactly what Rowan did. He especially targeted female clients, once commenting on how he had to change the soap in the men's room 3 times but not once in the women's room. It was already mentioned that Hannah's parents didn't like Rowan at first, but they really tried to give him a chance. They wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt because Hannah loved him and they didn't want to push her away, but eventually they started to like him and were happy for Hannah. Rowan promised her parents that he would leave his wife, who he was still living with, even after they were separated. Hannah's parents weren't happy about that situation, but Rowan kept assuring them that it was just a matter of time and that he was staying for the sake of the kid. Finally, he did break off that relationship completely, and Hannah's parents felt relieved for a brief moment. It seemed like he was following through on his promises. Rowan ended up proposing to Hannah and they got married in October 2012 in Kingscliff, New South Wales, Australia. Hannah's parents said it was the best day of her life. Hannah herself told them she felt like a princess at the time of their wedding. Hannah was 14 weeks pregnant with their first child, Aaliyah, who was born on April 10, 2013. 2 years later, on March 19, 2015, Lyanna was born, and a year after that, on December 4, 2016, Trey came into the world. Aaliyah was described as a smart, brilliant and sassy young girl who was destined to achieve a lot when she grew up. Lyanna was funny, cheeky, sweet and full of empathy for others, and Trey, the youngest, was the apple of his mother's eye. He was the golden child, often described as a mommy's boy. Even at the Age of 3 he had already started showing a sporting side, having learned how to kick and pass a football. Rowan, likely due to his difficult personality and lack of social skills, was never able to make enough money to support his family, and this left Hannah as the main breadwinner. The couple decided to open a gym together, but they didn't have enough money to get their venture off the ground. Hannah's parents stepped in as financial backers, as they wanted to support their daughter's dreams at the time. In addition to personal training, both Hannah and Rowan worked at a sports shoe retailer. Rowan had pushed for this arrangement, likely because he wanted to keep tabs on Hannah and wanted to know where she was at all times. His behavior at the store was no different from how he acted at the various gyms he had worked at before. He belittled the female employees just as he had done with his clients, and never missed a chance to assert his supposed superiority over women. One day Rowan was giving a personal training session to Hannah's mom, Sue. During the session he intentionally dropped her on her head, which caused her to violently collide with the floor and start bleeding. Rowan stood there laughing at her and mocking her lack of coordination. Despite this incident and their own reservations, Hannah's parents continued to try their hardest to accept Rowan for the sake of their daughter. In the early days of the relationship it seemed good. Both Hannah and Rowan appeared happy, but after the children arrived things began to change, and they changed quickly. Even though the gym wasn't entirely their own, Rowan's behavior became increasingly erratic and concerning. Sue noticed early on that Rowan didn't like her and he treated her badly from the start, but Sue wasn't one to back down and she stood up to Rowan, which became a huge issue for him. It was clear that his problem wasn't just with her personally. He had a deep-seated belief that men were superior to women. That complex colored everything he did. Sue's husband Lloyd also felt Rowan's hostility. Rowan would belittle him too, and seemed especially jealous of the close relationship between Hannah and her mom. Rowan didn't want Hannah to have any meaningful relationships with anyone, especially those who might point out how wrong his behavior was. He wanted her completely isolated. As time went on, Hannah's family noticed troubling changes in her. She became increasingly withdrawn and overly concerned about her appearance. She was constantly worried that she looked fat, a fear Rowan had drilled into her by calling her a pig and saying she was overweight, especially after she had their children. Rowan seemed to take pleasure in pushing people to their limits at the gym. He would push his clients so hard during workouts that they would often become physically ill. Rowan's expectations for Hannah were impossibly high. She had to be attractive enough to meet his standards, yet somehow control the attention she might get from other men. He didn't want her looking like a slob, but he also couldn't stand the idea of anyone else finding her attractive. At that point things were financially tough for the couple. They opened their gym in 2015, but after 3 years they had to move it to a different location due to struggles. Sue and Lloyd did everything they could to help, even going as far as reorganizing their home to cover bills and rent. Despite their support, Rowan's reckless spending drained their resources and put even more strain on the family. Hannah ended up opening a secret bank account just to manage their bills because Rowan was squandering the money on his own interests, leaving the family finances in disarray. Despite being the primary breadwinner, Hannah was left trying to keep everything afloat while Rowan spent their resources. According to Sue, Hannah was considering leaving Rowan shortly after Lyanna was born, but then she became pregnant with Trey, and Rowan's reaction to having a son made Hannah feel even more trapped. She was sure that Rowan would be determined to keep Trey, but despite her own doubts, Sue and Lloyd began preparing their home for Hannah and the children. Hannah's passion for CrossFit was one of the few bright spots in her life. She competed with a team from the gym, including a close friend Dave Kramer. In 2019, Hannah's team qualified for a major competition and she was thrilled. Rowan, however, didn't qualify for the solo event and insisted on joining Hannah's team even though no one wanted him there. His insistence was typical of his controlling nature. Hannah, in a moment of frustration, apologized to a team member for Rowan's behavior, but her young daughter Aaliyah accidentally recorded the conversation on her phone. When Rowan found out, he got extremely upset and accused Hannah of disrespecting him. After this outburst, Rowan pulled out of the competition as he believed that without him the team would have to pull out, but despite the setback the team managed to find a replacement. When Hannah returned home from the gym on the day of the competition, Rowan and the kids were missing with no message or note left behind. Rowan finally called her at lunchtime, blaming her for the situation and saying he would return the children when he felt like it. He also expressed his disbelief that she had contacted her mom and brother, revealing that he had been listening to her calls. Sue encouraged Hannah to continue with the competition and insisted that pulling out would only play into Rowan's hands. Despite the chaos and fear, Hannah was determined to not let Rowan's manipulation control her life any further. She confided in a few trusted people and told them that she was scared Rowan might use the children as leverage against her if she dared to stand up to him or file for divorce. Though she believed Rowan wouldn't physically harm the children, she was terrified he might run away with them or turn them against her. Hannah was confident Rowan would never physically harm the kids because up until that point he hadn't physically attacked her. Her abuse had been emotional, financial and sexual, but not physical. This distinction led her to not fully recognize her situation as domestic abuse, but things took a dark turn later that year. After a jiu-jitsu class, Rowan came home full of adrenaline. Without warning, he tripped Hannah to the floor, leaned over her and grabbed her forcefully by the throat. He threatened her, saying, "You have no idea what I'm capable of." This incident was a stark escalation from his previous behavior, and it seemed to be the tipping point for Hannah. Despite the emotional and financial abuse she had been through, Hannah remained a strong, independent woman at her core. At that point, she decided to seek help from a police officer. During their conversation, Hannah detailed her life with Rowan and the abuse she had suffered. The officer explained that being coerced into sexual intercourse daily against her was indeed a form of sexual assault. This realization was a crucial turning point for Hannah, as it validated her experiences and helped her recognize the severity of her situation. The officer explained the concept of coercive behavior to Hannah, helping her understand that she was experiencing a form of domestic abuse as defined by law. Realizing she was indeed a victim of domestic abuse, Hannah quickly packed the bare necessities for herself and her children and moved into her parents' house in Camp Hill in November of 2019. With the relationship officially over, though not yet legally dissolved, Hannah decided to allow Rowan to see the children. At that time, without any formal court orders, there was little she could do to control the situation. Around the same period, Rowan began visiting his church pastor. The pastor later observed that Rowan had an alpha male complex and controlling tendencies. Rowan confided in the pastor on several occasions and revealed moments when he recognized that he was in the wrong and needed to change, yet he struggled to figure out how to make those changes. The pastor also observed Rowan's behavior at the gym and was taken aback by the aggressive and controlling tendencies he witnessed. Rowan's clients regularly vomited during his training sessions, which was a clear sign of excessive and harmful practices. In private conversations with Hannah, the pastor tried to offer help, but Hannah was clear about her position. She told co-workers that she feared Rowan might one day try to kill her, indicating that she had no intention of getting back together. Despite this, she had not yet filed a formal complaint or sought further protection. On Boxing Day, Rowan's confidence in his control over Hannah reached a disturbing new level. While Hannah was walking down the street with her children, Rowan approached them and forcibly took their daughter Liana. Hannah was frantic, and for 2 days she had no idea where her daughter was. Eventually, the police found Liana with her father, who had not harmed her but had caused significant distress to Hannah. Following this incident, the police advised Hannah to file a formal complaint and get a restraining order against Rowan. Although she took this advice, Rowan was still granted joint custody of the children, which allowed him to continue his harassment. The day after taking his children out, Rowan returned them to Hannah's parents' home as agreed, but in a particularly cruel act of intimidation he put pictures of Hannah in her underwear around the outside of his car for the children to see. When Hannah tried to remove the photos, Rowan reacted violently. He grabbed her by the lower arm, causing a sprain to her wrist, and then hit her in the face, busting her lip. This physical assault was witnessed by Hannah's mother, Sue, who rushed to her daughter. Rowan fled the scene, but the damage was already done. On the morning of February 19, 2020, Hannah was preparing to drop her 3 children off at school. Rowan Baxter, ignoring the restraining orders, forced his way into the passenger seat of her Kia Sportage. Despite Hannah's desperate pleas for him to leave, Rowan didn't. As they drove, Hannah noticed a man washing his car and decided to stop there. This man, Michael Zemek, was about to witness a scene of unimaginable horror. Right there, Rowan began pouring gasoline over Hannah and the children. At first, Michael was startled by how fast the car pulled up and the desperate cries for help. He heard Hannah scream for help and witnessed Rowan's cold, detached demeanor. The situation escalated quickly when Rowan ignited the gasoline with a lighter, which led the front of the car to burn. Hannah managed to escape the car, but her body was still burning. She screamed for her children, who were still trapped inside. Her cries were heard by an off-duty paramedic who happened to be passing by. This paramedic rushed to Hannah while Michael Zemek, despite suffering burns to his hands and face, used his garden hose to try to extinguish the flames surrounding Hannah's body. Despite their efforts, Hannah's focus remained on her children, whom she feared had been lost in the fire. When Michael Zemek realized that there were children in the car, he tried to reach the vehicle, but the intense heat and flames made it impossible to approach. Hannah suffered burns over 97% of her body, with only the soles of her feet untouched by the flames. The severity of her injuries was almost beyond comprehension, yet her thoughts remained solely with her children. When the police came, Hannah was unrecognizable, but despite her critical condition, she made sure that the details of the attack and the identity of her assailant were clearly communicated. She identified Rowan Baxter as the perpetrator and confirmed that there was a protection order against him, and provided a detailed description of him in the incident. When the officer asked if Rowan had ever been threatening before, Hannah replied, "Not to me, no." It's a tragic sign of how deep the abuse had run that even as her life was slipping away, she didn't see it as abuse. Meanwhile, Rowan Baxter, who had suffered severe burns over 80% of his body, was a different story. After managing to escape the burning car, he sat on the roadside while others worked to put out the flames. Instead of showing any concern for his children or making any effort to help, Baxter found a knife he had brought with him and began to guard the car, preventing anyone from reaching the children inside. He even threatened a neighbor who tried to help with a fire extinguisher. He then took his own life by stabbing himself in the chest. Hannah Clark died in the hospital later that day at the age of 31. Her children, Aaliyah and Trey, were aged 6, 4, and 3. After the incident, an inquest was held to figure out what went wrong and how to prevent similar tragedies. People who knew Rowan and Hannah shared their experiences. Nicole, Hannah's friend who had tried to warn the police, expressed her frustration that they didn't act sooner. Hannah's mom, Sue, spoke about how Rowan had mistreated her daughter and even assaulted her. The pastor who had tried to help Rowan also testified, mentioning how he believed Rowan felt no remorse for his controlling behavior. The note, found written by Rowan Baxter on January 26, 2020, provides a glimpse into his mindset before the tragedy unfolded. In it, he painted himself as the victim, blaming Hannah for destroying his life and threatening to make her suffer by taking their children away from her. The note's tone and content reveal his distorted perception of victimhood and his intent to cause Hannah emotional pain, suggesting that he may have planned to abduct the children as a form of punishment. Just a few weeks before the horrific events of February 19, Hannah confided in her friend Nicole about her deep fears for her safety. Nicole, alarmed by Hannah's distress and aware of Rowan's increasingly strange behavior, decided to go to the police to express her concerns. Nicole told the police that she believed Hannah and her children were in imminent danger. Despite Nicole's warnings and her detailed accounts of Rowan's threatening behavior, the police couldn't do anything as they didn't have solid evidence of a physical threat or an actual crime. On March 9, 2020, Hannah and her children were laid to rest together. "We've got each other, so that's our strength, and we've got our boys. You know, we've lost half our family, but we still have the other half, and we've got to be strong for them and for each other." In response to the devastating loss of Hannah Clark and her children, Clark's family founded the Small Steps for Hannah Foundation in March 2020. This charity aims to fight domestic and family violence in Australia to prevent incidents like the one that claimed Hannah and her children on February 23, 2020. Over 1,000 people gathered at the Bill Hwit Reserve in Camp Hill for a public vigil to honor and mourn the family. To commemorate their memory, a section of the reserve was dedicated as Hannah's Place with a sign, a shelter, and newly planted trees. This memorial was officially opened on September 8, 2020, on the day that would have been Hannah's 22nd birthday. Story 3. Yes, I was wondering if I could have a police officer come to an office building. We have somebody in our building that will not leave, and he's not an employee, and apparently he is. Have you asked him to leave yet? Yeah, we have. I will not stop until I find my family, or until it's my last day on this earth. How could a man slay not just his wife but his 2 young stepchildren as well? That's the question we must ask when looking at the case of Luis Toledo, a man whose jealousy and violent impulses led to the brutal slaughter and mysterious disappearance of his entire family. 10 years after the incident occurred, it seems like there are more questions than answers. Did Luis Toledo, a former gang member, really take all those lives that day? How did his obsession with his 21-year-old neighbor Tian Jackson factor into everything? Today we'll be exploring the mysteries behind this case and attempting to explain the bizarre tragic events that unfolded. Today's video is sponsored by Aura, and it's a really important time to be talking about them because hackers may have stolen the social security numbers of every American. Over 2.9 billion records were stolen from national public data, which offers personal information to employers, private investigators, staffing agencies, and others doing background checks. These stolen records include a person's full name, address, date of birth, social security number, and phone number, along with alternate names and birth date, and members of the hacker group have reportedly released this information for free online. If you weren't taking precautions with your personal information online before, this should be a huge wake-up call. You've never been more vulnerable online than you are right now, but I'm not too worried about it because I use Aura. Aura alerts me if they find my phone number, email, or social security number on the dark web. They're going to let me know fast if anyone tries to use this information to access my credit or bank accounts. They give me up to $5 million in identity theft insurance should the worst case scenario happen. They also provide a bunch of other features to keep you safe online, all inside one app. You can go to my link, aura.com/into-the-deep, to try 14 days for free. That will be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data is exposed. I highly recommend you do this right now, because not only is national public data not going to do anything to help you, they probably aren't even going to face any repercussions for this leak. I'm not leaving myself and my family vulnerable to data breaches, and if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com/into-the-deep to try 2 weeks for free. 28-year-old Unia Suarez was a Normal woman by all accounts. She had 2 children, 9-year-old Talia and 8-year-old Michael, who she'd been raising alone in Deltona, Florida ever since their father left the picture. The circumstances behind the father's exit from their lives are unclear, but the void he left behind was difficult to fill even so. Unia's mother Felicita Enves says that she was very happy with her life. She loved being a mom. Her children were lively and joyful, and everything basically seemed perfect for a time, but a few years before her demise, Unia met a man named Luis Toledo and felt an instant attraction. Their chance encounter happened at a festival where Unia was attacked by a man. Toledo immediately jumped to her rescue, picking her up and taking her to the hospital to make sure she was okay. What Unia wanted more than anything else was a protector, and it seemed like she'd found exactly that in Toledo. Toledo was the dictionary definition of a protective masculine lover. He was strong and never shied away from a fight, so much so that he earned the nickname Semi, owing to his fists striking people with the force of a semi-truck. Unia was smitten, but she had no idea about the dark past he was hiding. Later reports revealed that Toledo had been the 3rd highest ranking member of the Latin Kings, a street gang that was involved in all sorts of crimes including narcotics, trafficking and homicide. However, by the time he met Unia, Toledo seemed to have left all of that behind him, even testifying against his former gang in court. Because of this, Unia began to trust him enough to allow him to move in. Toledo became a stepfather to her children, and for a time Unia felt that things were going to get better. The couple got married. Luis started going to barber college to start a career for himself, and Unia claimed he was the best thing to ever happen to her. It didn't take long for the image of domestic bliss to shatter, though he seemed more than happy to fill the role of protector. Toledo was less willing to take on the responsibilities of a provider, while Unia went to work at her full-time job at American Canine Solutions. Toledo would spend the day playing video games, going to the gym, and basically doing whatever he pleased. His favorite activities seemed to involve visiting his neighbor and fellow barber college student, 21-year-old Tyshawn Jackson. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that Tayakon had been involved in criminal activities in the past, although the exact nature of these activities haven't been revealed. The connection between him and Toledo is similarly unclear. Were they really just friends, or was something deeper and more sinister lurking under the surface? We may never know, but this relationship would become central to the violent events that followed. Regardless, Unia quickly grew tired of her husband's lack of discipline. They frequently got into fights over how often he played video games, and his relationship with Tyshawn was another source of friction. There was also another secret that would escalate matters down the line. In mid-2013, Toledo started to suspect his wife was having an affair with her married co-worker Kevin Dridden. Toledo had always been the jealous type, and his suspicions seemed to send him over the edge. On October 13, 2013, Unia went on a business trip with Kevin, prompting Toledo to start calling her non-stop. He'd already accused her of sleeping with Kevin in the past, an accusation that Unia had always denied. While on the business trip, she texted her husband telling him that he's not thinking clearly. She explained that absolutely nothing was going on between her and Dredden, but Toledo wasn't convinced. He responded to the text by asking her who has her attention if not Kevin, implying that she'd been neglecting her own husband and that someone must be taking up most of her time. The fact that he himself spent the majority of the day with Tyshawn instead of taking care of his stepchildren likely didn't occur to Toledo at the time. The fight continued over the next 3 days, so by the time Unia returned from the business trip, she was done with the relationship. Toledo's controlling, possessive behavior had pushed her past the point of no return, and she told him she wanted a divorce on October 16. Toledo seemed to take the news surprisingly well, asking Unia to let him stay with her for 3 months so he could save up some money before moving out. Unia agreed, but she didn't know that she'd effectively given herself a Death sentence. According to police reports, Toledo had bugged Unia's phone not long after she returned from the business trip. As a result, he was able to see every single message on her phone. One of these messages turned out to be an inappropriately intimate exchange between her and Kevin, where they were planning to hook up at a later date. This absolutely infuriated Toledo, who entered his car and began speeding to Yenia's office. During this time, Unia desperately texted Toledo, pleading with him not to do anything rash. She claimed that the encounter between her and Dredd had been a mistake. Despite that, Toledo arrived at her office ready to tear the whole place down. At approximately 1 p.m. a 911 call was made from Unia's office, with the caller stating that there was a man in the building who refused to leave as police departed for the scene. Toledo stomped into the main office floor and started screaming at Unia and Kevin. The 911 call also happened to record Toledo's statements, with the enraged man saying that he had some incriminating messages to show his wife, and her lover Yenia can be heard apologizing and sobbing as her husband makes a scene. Witnesses claimed that he then slapped her on the face with all his might, sending her crashing to the floor. Following this, Toledo exited the building, fleeing the sound of police sirens. He and Unia later met at Felicita's place to hash things out and come to terms. Did they want to continue in their relationship, or was it time to call it quits? Apparently they mutually decided to give their relationship another shot and went home. At around 7:45 p.m. this would be the last time that anyone saw Unia Suarez alive. No one knows exactly what happened over the next 12 hours. All we have to go on is testimony from Toledo and reports from the police investigation. Even so, we can stitch together the approximate sequence of events that led to the demise of Inia and her children at around 3:00 in the morning. Toledo claims that he ran into Tyshawn outside. He complained about how his wife never let him play video games at home, but then decided to just go for it anyway since it was his home too. The pair started gaming, and when Unia heard them, she apparently came outside and started screaming at Toledo. However, the ensuing investigation revealed this version of events to be completely false. This means that Toledo and Unia were alone at home, and any altercation they got into had nothing to do with the culprit and Tyshawn playing video games. One thing we do know for sure is that Toledo slammed his hand into Yenia's throat in the early hours of October 23. The force of the blow was so severe that it shattered her windpipe, with Toledo watching as she died in front of his eyes. Toledo claims that Unia attacked him first, even trying to show scratch marks on his back. To prove it, however, the fact that these marks weren't presented as evidence by his defense suggests that he completely made up this detail. Either way, the argument that preceded Toledo's vicious attack was so loud that it woke up the kids. Tia and Michael rushed out of their bedroom to find their mom dead on the floor and their stepdad looming over her. Once again, there are two versions of the events that followed. According to Toledo, who maintained that Tian was there the entire time, he told his neighbor to take the children to the bathroom so that they wouldn't be traumatized by their mother's corpse. Toledo claims that he then heard the children screaming, and when he opened the bathroom door, he found Tyshawn standing over their dead bodies with a bloody axe in his hands. However, evidence found at the crime scene basically confirms the story to be false. Forensic analysts noted that there was hardly any blood spatter on the walls. Instead, there were just a few drops here and there. If the perpetrator had used an axe as the homicide weapon, it would have left considerable spatter in every corner. The type of spatter they found suggests that a blunt object was used, and the actual object hints at the sheer brutality of the attack Toledo committed. What could this object have been? Before we get into that, we must first discuss the discovery of the crime and the investigation that followed on the morning of October 23. Unia's mother became suspicious when she didn't receive her regular morning call from her daughter. This prompted her to call her daughter several times, only for her calls to go unanswered. By this point, Felicita was all but certain that something bad had happened. She had a sinking feeling in her stomach, a sense of impending doom, and she just had to drive over there to find out what happened. She called the police before heading out, arriving at the same time as the deputies. Moments later, Toledo pulls up in his car looking perfectly calm and collected. When Felicita asks him where her daughter is, Toledo says that she left with the kids at some point last night. His ruse wasn't going to last though. Police soon ask him to let them inside, and when they enter they're overwhelmed by the smell of Lysol. This might not have been enough to arrest him on its own, but Toledo was already wanted for the assault at the office the previous day. The police were able to bring him in, and Felicita was left to wonder what became of her grandchildren. Surely Inea wouldn't have just run off with them, she thought. She decided to call the school to see if they were there, and felt like her heart had fallen out of her chest when school officials said they hadn't shown up that morning. Felic was now certain that Toledo had done something terrible to her daughter and grandchildren, and police got to work trying to put the pieces together. The scene of the apparent crime was cordoned off, and police started scouring the family home for clues. An investigator found spots of blood in the bathroom where they'd later realized the children were slain. The police were still treating this as a missing persons case due to the lack of bodies, but this was soon about to change. For now, Toledo maintained that his wife wasn't missing and that she could very well be with her lover Kevin. However, Kevin's wife confirmed that he'd been with her all night. The case took a shocking turn when none other than Tian Jackson approached police to tell them something critical. Shortly after 6:00 in the morning, he'd received a call from Toledo claiming that his wife was missing and he needed his help in moving her car. He never explained why he needed to move her car, and Tyshawn didn't question his friend's motivations. Toledo drove his wife's car while Tian followed in Toledo's vehicle, and once they arrived, the neighbor witnessed the culprit wiping Unia's car down. They then drove to a nearby dumpster where Toledo disposed of empty bottles of cleaning chemicals and the mat from the trunk of his car. Toledo returned to the car and told Tian that he had just snapped. Shaken by this strange behavior, Tyshawn told Toledo to drop him off at a convenience store where he was captured on surveillance footage waiting in line. When police located the dumpster, they found a pair of boots wrapped up in the trunk mat with blood on them. This indicates that Toledo had either stomped or kicked at least one or two of the victims to death, and possibly all of them. With the new evidence and Tayakon's testimony, police were able to go back to Toledo with a new approach. They showed him pictures of his family, which sparked an intensely emotional reaction from the perpetrator. Between sobs, he confessed to shattering his wife's windpipe, but claimed that Tian was the one that took the children's lives with an axe. Do you want to talk about him now? You went over. He had the left hand, something in his left hand or right hand. It was in his right hand, his right hand, and it was the— can you describe it? Like exactly how it looked? Brown wooden handle, black tape on it, and it was rusted. As we've said previously, investigators concluded that Tian wasn't involved with the actual crime. There's a chance that Toledo knew he was out of options. During the interrogation, he kept asking to go to the bathroom, claiming that he was experiencing stomach problems. During one of these visits, he shattered the bathroom mirror, picked up one of the shards and began slashing at his arms. His attempt to take his own life failed, with police breaking down the door, dragging him out and sending him to get medical attention. I think he was in the bathroom with stomach problems. Yeah, your bathroom again, stomach problems. Okay. Let's make sure it's clear. Break it. I got it. He's able to barricade himself in the bathroom. He breaks a mirror, takes the mirror, the glass from the mirror, and begins to start cutting himself. Despite the failure of the attempt, it's a strong sign that Toledo had a guilty conscience. His attempt to explain his wife's disappearance had failed, as did his claims that Tayakon was the one behind the children losing their lives right before this incident. Toledo basically admitted that he knew where the bodies were and that he'd never confessed their location. Regardless, the police had enough evidence to charge Toledo with 2 counts of homicide in the second degree, 1 count of homicide in the third degree, and an additional count of tampering with physical evidence due to Toledo's background as an enforcer for the Latin king's. Authorities were sure that he had the knowledge required to dispose of the bodies, knowledge of how to clean a crime scene, how to dispose of evidence, how to dispose of bodies. Certainly he was the expert at that. He was, what's more, he appeared to flash gang signs at one point during his trial. This seems to suggest that he was threatening the prosecution, but his signaling was noticed by the judge and led to a stern reprimand. Even though he was out of options, Toledo didn't seem willing to give up his violent ways. During the trial, several witnesses came forward to testify against him, including Kevin Dredden and Tian Jackson. Kevin spoke about the assault at the office, telling the court that Toledo had immediately become violent with his wife. As for Tian, he denied any involvement in the actual crime, and the evidence seemed to support this. On top of that, the young man broke down into sobs at the implication that he could have slain the children, saying that he liked them and that they were good kids. Do you like the kids? They're nice kids. Do you feel close to them? Yes. Do you have anything to do with their death? No. The most damning evidence of all was Toledo's own confession, which the defense desperately wanted to suppress. Their efforts went in vain, with the judge allowing all of Toledo's statements to become part of the record. Between his confession and Tyshawn's heartfelt testimony, the jury were convinced. The verdict appears to be in proper order. Will the defendant please rise, face the jury, and hearken to the verdict? Madam Clerk published the verdict in the Circuit Court of the 7th Judicial Circuit in and for St. Johns County Court, State of Florida versus Luis Toledo, case number 2013-102-888 CFDF. Verdict: Count 1. Count 1, murder of Michael Elijah Otto. We do jurify the defendant Luis Toledo. As to count 1 of the indictment, as follows: guilty of first-degree murder is charged in the indictment. Count 2. First-degree murder of Elijah Otto. We do jurify the defendant Luis Toledo. As to count 2 of the indictment, as follows: guilty of first-degree murder is charged in the indictment. Count 3. Second-degree murder of Christine Warren. We do jurify the defendant Luis Toledo. As to count 3 of the indictment, as follows: guilty of the charge of second-degree murder as charged in the indictment. Count 4, tampering with physical evidence. We do jurify the defendant Luis Toledo. As to count 4 of the indictment, guilty of the charge of tampering with physical evidence. So to say, we all dated in St. Augustine v. St. Johns County, Florida, this 27th day of October 2017, November 4th. Toledo was the man behind this twisted incident, and he deserved to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. 10 of the 12 jury members wanted Toledo to get the death penalty, but since the law requires a unanimous verdict, the perpetrator was able to escape with his life. Even so, the judge noted that he showed zero remorse during the trial and sentenced him to 3 consecutive life sentences behind bars. More than a decade later, Felicity Nevis continues to hold memorials for her daughter and grandchildren. She's become a vocal activist, raising awareness about domestic violence and the loss it can cause. Her family is gone forever, but police and prosecutors managed to ensure that he'll never hurt anyone again. The jurors were asked that if you were remorseful about killings. By a vote of 12-0, they said no. Not even the 2 people who voted to spare your life found any remorse in your actions or your statements. I totally concur with their findings. I don't believe you're remorseful, and as such you will receive no mercy from the court. However, the bodies of Eunice Suarez and her children Tia and Otto haven't been found to this very day. Story 4, breaking news now at 5:00 out of Rockford. 4 people are dead. 5 others are hurt in a stabbing attack this afternoon in Rockford. Police say they have a man in custody. They say young minds are full of potential, but sometimes they can also be full of chaos in the city of Rockford. Christian Sadto turned a regular day into a nightmare. It all started with a visit to his friend's house, but what came next was pure horror. Sato fatally stabbed his friend and his friend's mother, but he didn't stop there. He ran over a postal worker, attacked an innocent family, and brutally assaulted 3 young girls, leaving 15-year-old Jenna A. Newcomb dead. This wasn't just violence, it was a rampage. But what drives a person to such madness? Let's dive into the disturbing story behind this mass murder in Rockford. The day was March 27, 2024. 22-year-old Christian Ivan Sato went to visit his childhood friend Jacob Shabak for what seemed like a casual hangout. They were just going to smoke at Jacob's house, something they had done countless times before. Smoking together wasn't new to them, and it wasn't Sato's first time by any means. It was a normal routine between friends, but on that day, something went terribly wrong. What exactly happened during that visit is still unclear. However, Sato would later claim that the joint they smoked had been laced with an unknown narcotic, and according to him it was Jacob's doing. That's when things took a dark turn. Paranoia set in and Sato's mind spiraled out of control. He became convinced that his friend had betrayed him by putting something in the weed, and then came the moment when everything snapped. In a fit of panic and confusion, Sato grabbed a knife from the kitchen and fatally stabbed Jacob. The scene was horrifying, but sadly it didn't end there. Sato then turned his sights to Jacob's mother, 63-year-old Ramona. She too became a victim of his paranoia and rage as he fatally stabbed her to death. At this point, Jacob was still desperately trying to escape. Eyewitnesses reported seeing him running frantically across the street with Sato hot on his heels. Sato was seen holding a black object which he used to stab Jacob while he was down on the ground. Things took a terrifying turn when Sato jumped into his black Chevy Silverado, which was parked right in the driveway of 2316 Home Street. In a chilling display of brutality, Sato drove over Jacob with his truck. Despite the impact, Jacob managed to get up and make his way back into his house, barely clinging to life. But Sato wasn't done yet. He followed Jacob inside and brutally stabbed him multiple times before leaving the scene. He was only 23 with so much of life ahead of him. After leaving the Shabak home, Christian Sato's terrifying rampage was far from over. He drove his black Chevy Silverado to the 2200 block of Wheaton Lane, where he crossed paths with Jay Larson, a male carrier who had been working in Rockford for 25 years, a witness living at 2217. Waylayan was the first to spot the chaos from inside his home. He heard a commotion outside and looked out to see Sato attacking Larson. The witness watched in shock as Sato, holding a black object, pounced on the mailman. Sato was punching Larson while he was lying on the grass near the front of the witness house. Panicked, the witness opened his front door just as Larson yelled for help, pleading for someone to call the police. As the witness dialed 911, Sato moved toward his house, causing the witness to slam the door shut and lock it. He continued to watch the scene unfold through his window. According to him, Sato then went back to his black Chevy Silverado, which was parked nearby, and retrieved a knife with a bright orange handle. Armed with the knife, Sato returned to Larson and stabbed him multiple times, but the brutality didn't stop there. Sato got back into his truck, drove forward and ran over Larson. The impact was so severe that it struck a nearby parked vehicle. Not satisfied, Sato reversed the truck and ran over Larson again. The witness saw Sato drive off, disappearing between the houses. The witness later went to the Rockford Police Department, where he was shown a lineup of photos. He confidently identified Sato as the attacker, confirming that it was Sato who had brutally assaulted and ran over Larson. And Sato didn't stop his reign of terror there. As police were dealing with the scene at Winnick Gillen, they received more 911 calls about a new attack at 4803 Cleveland Avenue. When officers arrived, they were greeted by Darlene, her son Jacob, and her daughter Kathy. They reported that Sato had burst into their home armed with a katana-style knife. Darlene had just opened her door to let their dog outside when Sadto appeared at the doorway. Without warning, he violently stabbed Darlene on the left side of her face near her eye. Once Sadto burst into the house, he wasted no time unleashing chaos. Jacob and Kathy, caught off guard, bravely tried to defend themselves from his relentless assault. Sadto's attack was brutal. Kathy took a sharp stab to the lower left side of her chin, leaving her in severe pain. Jacob wasn't any luckier. He got slashed across his forehead and inside his left ear. He couldn't even tell if these wounds were from the knife or from Sadto's furious punches. In a desperate effort to fend off their attacker, Jacob grabbed a syrup bottle and swung it at Sadto. The blow seemed to catch Sadto off guard, causing him to quickly retreat from the house. Darlene, Jacob and Kathy were rushed to the hospital as soon as possible. Fortunately, their injuries, though serious, weren't life-threatening. After receiving prompt medical attention, they were treated and released, thankfully safe but shaken from the terrifying ordeal. Later, when questioned by the police, Sadto admitted to attacking the residents with a knife. He even recalled that while he was in the house, the family's pit bull had bitten him on the leg after his rampage at Darlene's home. Sadto fled on foot as the police and emergency services scrambled to address the numerous crime scenes. They were flagged down about another incident at 4715 Cleveland Avenue. There, officers discovered another grim scene: two injured teenage girls who we will be calling Sheila and Kia for their privacy, and a deceased girl named Jenna found in the basement. Jenna's body bore evident signs of severe trauma. Sheila, who was rushed to the hospital, had suffered a serious fracture, numerous lacerations to her head and significant bruising on the left side of her torso. Kia, on the other hand, had several bruises on her left shoulder, arm and leg. The extent of their injuries underscored the brutal and relentless nature of Sadto's attack that day. Detectives spoke with Kia, who had been spending the night at her friend Jenna's house. The two friends were enjoying a movie in the basement, huddled around a laptop in Jenna's cozy bedroom. Meanwhile, Sheila, Jenna's sister, was upstairs. She had come downstairs to warn the others that an intruder had broken into the house. The intruder didn't waste any time. Armed with Jenna's softball bat, he stormed into the basement where the girls were. According to Kia, the suspect, drenched in blood, stormed into the room and started shouting at the girls, demanding to know where the gun was. Terrified, the girls scrambled into a corner of the bedroom, trying to hide from the crazed intruder. He didn't hesitate and began swinging the bat violently. Kia, who was curled up in a fetal position on the floor, wasn't spared and was struck on her left side. Despite her attempts to shield herself, Jenna, who was also hit multiple times, eventually collapsed from the blows. The attacker continued his rampage until he abruptly stopped and fled the house, leaving behind a scene of chaos and horror. Still in shock, Kia dashed outside and flagged down the officers who had arrived. She described the attacker as a man in his mid-20s with tan skin and black hair styled in a bowl cut. He was wearing a beige hoodie and blue jeans and stood about 5 feet tall, a bit taller than her. Kia also mentioned that he was skinny and completely covered in blood. When she first saw him, detectives also interviewed Sheila, who shared a chilling account of the attack. Sheila had been in the kitchen preparing a snack when the suspect burst in through an unlocked rear door. The intruder quickly grabbed one of Jenna's softball bats and began aimlessly wandering around the first floor. Sheila, realizing the danger, rushed downstairs to warn Kia and her sister Jenna. As Sheila reached the basement, the attacker followed, swinging the bat with reckless force. Jenna was struck repeatedly and soon lost consciousness from the brutal blows. The intruder then ominously declared, "I'm going to get a gun," before heading back upstairs. The girls, terrified and helpless, could hear him moving around upstairs. In the midst of the chaos, Kia managed to call the police, her voice trembling with fear. Later, Sheila and Jenna's mother bravely came forward with a heartbreaking revelation. She shared that Jenna had fought to protect her sister during the attack, a tragic fact that made the situation even more sorrowful. Jenna was Just about to turn 16 this year, a time when she should have been celebrating her youth and future following the horrific attack at Jenna's house. Sato continued his rampage. He smashed a window at a home on the 4600 block of Florence Street and entered the house with a knife inside. He began attacking a woman. Fortunately, the woman managed to escape, fleeing on foot to a front yard located on the 2100 block of Eggleston Road. Sato pursued her relentlessly, continuing his brutal assault in a desperate bid to help the woman. A man driving a gray Jeep stopped at the scene. Tragically, he was also attacked by Sato and suffered multiple stab wounds. It was at this point, around 1:35 in the afternoon, that the police finally managed to take Sato into custody. In a dramatic turn of events, Sato, covered in blood and clearly exhausted from his violent spree, dropped the knife right at the woman's feet. As officers closed in on him, the gravity of the situation was apparent, as both the woman and the man who had tried to help her were left with serious injuries. The woman, whose condition was particularly dire, was immediately rushed to the hospital. Her injuries were so severe that she had to be intubated to help her breathe, and when Sato was apprehended by the police, he was still wearing the gray sweatshirt and blue jeans, and he was covered in blood. His hands had minor cuts, and he was taken to the hospital for treatment before being released after being read his Miranda rights. Sato confessed to attacking and stabbing a mailman. He explained that he had fled from that scene upon seeing the police and ended up at a house with a garage where he saw a motorcycle. Sato entered through the unlocked back door of this house, which was located at 4715 Cleveland Avenue. Inside, he found a bat in the kitchen. Sato remembered using the bat to attack the 3 kids he found in the basement. The bat, covered in blood, was later discovered in the upstairs bedroom. This forms part of the city's complaint against Sato. At this point, it's glaringly obvious that this attack is not just brutal but deeply disturbing and profoundly tragic, for people were killed and there are 7 people who were injured. The sheer scale of violence unleashed by Sato paints a horrifying picture, and it's evident that this incident is more than just a moment of chaos. It's a heartbreaking tragedy. What adds another layer of unease is the fact that Sato isn't a stranger to criminal activity. He lives on Upland Drive, a street alarmingly close to where the stabbings occurred. Sato's criminal record, while not extensive, includes a felony arrest from 2024, criminal damage to property at a local forest preserve. Additionally, he had some minor traffic offenses. However, despite these run-ins with the law, there was nothing in his past to suggest he was capable of such extreme violence. Authorities were taken aback by the sudden and extreme shift in Sato's behavior. No matter what personal traumas or problems Sato might have faced, nothing could justify the utter chaos he brought upon others. And despite the limited information available online about Sato, a Facebook post has offered some insight into his past. Vincent Cruz, a social media user, revealed that he went to Rockford East High School with Sato and graduated from Rock Valley College. At the time of the attack, Sato was employed at a clothing store called Hollister. In a heartfelt Facebook post, Cruz expressed his disbelief and sadness over the situation. He wrote, "I literally went to school with this guy. Like, what the heck? How could you do that? Someone who was so nice, Jacob aka Baca, wouldn't hurt a fly. And you do this to him. It's wild. I just don't get this world. Rest in peace, Baca. We will never forget you, my guy." Now, remember when Sato claimed that Jacob had put something in their joint? Well, initial urine tests have come back negative for any substances. This means that the tests didn't find any drugs or unusual chemicals in Jacob's system, and according to the investigation, Sato is mentally fit to stand for trial going forward. Sato now faces an extensive list of charges. He is charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, 7 counts of attempted first-degree murder, and 2 counts of home invasion. This array of charges reflects the severe nature of his crimes. All of the people hope that Sadto will receive a punishment that matches the suffering he inflicted on his victims. If Sadto is convicted, he could face up to 60 years in prison for each count of first-degree murder and attempted murder. For each count of home invasion he could be sentenced to up to 30 years. Moreover, there's a possibility of federal charges being added to his case because one of his victims was a postal worker. This could lead to even more severe penalties and extend his time in prison, and that is well deserved. The courtroom drama escalated on April 2 when Sadto made headlines again with a shocking outburst during his hearing. In a surprising and emotional display, Sadto shouted only, "God can judge me," and referred to the people in the courtroom as puppets and serpents. Sadto, appearing in an orange prison uniform wearing restraints around his waist, stood next to his public defender and shouted at Judge Scott Paganini a number of times, saying, "You're a puppet, you're from the devil, and only God can judge me." The case has drawn widespread attention and sparked a range of reactions from those affected and the general public. Rockford Mayor Tom McNamara has been a vocal figure in the aftermath, emphasizing the need for communal healing. According to the mayor, Jenna's mother wants everyone to know this. Jenna died saving her sister and her friend and protecting them from further harm. Jay Larson, a beloved postal worker who had dedicated over 20 years to serving the Rockford community, has also been remembered with great respect. Ruth Mendoza, an inspector in charge with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, praised Larson's commitment. Jay was doing what he loved, delivering mail to the customers he had served for 25 years. His dedication to his job and his community made his loss deeply felt among those who knew him. President Joe Biden has also weighed in on the tragedy, expressing his horror and sympathy in a statement released by the White House. Biden extended his prayers to the families of the victims and wished for the full recovery of those injured. He also commended the local law enforcement for their heroic actions, saying, "We are grateful for the heroic actions of local law enforcement who confronted the suspect and prevented the loss of more innocent lives. The situation is especially heartbreaking for the community, coming as it does so soon after another violent incident just days before the stabbing spree." Rockford experienced a tragic knife attack at a Walmart where an 18-year-old employee lost his life. Timothy Carter, a 28-year-old from Rockford, has been charged with first-degree murder in connection with this tragic event. To make matters worse, recent months have seen a troubling number of similar incidents involving young people across the United States. One particularly shocking case occurred at a Palikhi High School in Georgia, where a 14-year-old boy was charged with killing 4 people. The suspect, Colt Gray, faces multiple murder charges and is being tried as an adult due to the severity of the crimes. In another disturbing event, a 15-year-old was involved in a mass shooting in Raleigh, North Carolina, which resulted in the deaths of 5 people, including an off-duty police officer. The community is grappling with these shocking events, which serve as a stark reminder of the urgent need for comprehensive strategies to address and prevent violence among young people. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or distressed, it's important to remember that turning to drugs will only make things worse. Instead of escaping into substances, seek out healthier ways to cope and find support. If you ever feel unsafe or in danger, don't hesitate to reach out for help. There are people and resources ready to support you in difficult times. The world can indeed feel intimidating and overwhelming, but remember, you don't have to face it alone. Story 5. Now we're diving into a chilling and tragic story that shows just how dangerous obsession can be. In psychology, there's a term called Adele syndrome, which might not be familiar to many, but it describes something quite alarming: an intense, uncontrollable obsession with another person. The name comes from Adele Hugo, the youngest daughter of the famous French writer Victor Hugo. She was known for her beauty and talent as a pianist, but what happened to her life is truly tragic. Adele fell deeply in love with a man who didn't return her feelings, and this Unrequited love had a devastating impact on her mental health. Her obsession took over her life and she started following him everywhere, pretending to be his wife and even interfering with his career. She poisoned both her life and his end. Eventually she spent 43 years in a psychiatric hospital out of her 84 years. Half were spent in confinement due to her mental state. This condition where someone becomes overly attached or obsessed with another person is more common than you might think. It can range from harmless infatuation to a dangerous obsession that controls every thought and action. While many people can recover with the help of a psychologist, some cases go beyond that, requiring hospitalization or even intense therapy. But in extreme cases, this kind of obsession can push someone to do unpredictable and sometimes horrific things. One tragic example is the case of Zelia Shijulova, a young woman in Russia who met her Tinder date hoping for romance. But it ended in a nightmare. She was brutally murdered, found with multiple stab wounds to her chest. But what makes this even more disturbing is the details discovered during the autopsy. Her tongue had been cut out and a piece of her throat had been removed, likely so she couldn't scream for help, and it was all because of the obsession of a man who barely even knew her. Why did this happen, and how did she even meet this man? Let's dive deep into this very recent case that happened just this August. In this video we'll be referring to Zelia Shijulova as Zale for short. She's the woman at the heart of this tragic case. Now, Zale was known for her outgoing and lively personality, and she was only 29 years old. Additionally, she was a university teacher in Russia and loved to share her adventures with the world. Even though the case is still unfolding and we don't have all the details yet, what we do know really brings Zale's vibrant life to life. She was incredibly active on social media, especially on Facebook, through her posts and photos. You can almost see her joyful and adventurous spirit shining through. In fact, on August 12, 2024, she shared a breathtaking photo of herself dressed in an Indian outfit with the caption, "I became a guest at an Indian wedding in Mauritius, turned into an Indian girl." Rate the shot from 1 to 10. Little did anyone know this would be her final update. To give you some context, Zale was vacationing on the picturesque African island of Mauritius. This tropical paradise is located about 700 m east of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean and is known for its stunning beaches and serene environment. According to some witnesses, she was last seen on August 17 wearing a white and blue dress. She was also seen in CCTV footage getting into a blue Toyota driven by a local man who was giving her a ride when Zay didn't come back to her rental apartment. Her friend who was traveling with her immediately reported her missing. At the same time, something unusual started happening. Zay's family began receiving strange messages from her phone. These messages bizarrely claimed that Zay had chosen to disappear on purpose and didn't want any more contact with them. This was alarming for her loved ones. Zale was always very open about her life, regularly updating her family and friends about her travels on social media. She loved sharing every exciting moment with the world, so it seemed completely out of character for her to suddenly cut off all communication. Her sudden silence and the odd messages didn't add up. It was completely unlike the Zale they knew, who was always enthusiastic and in touch. This unexpected change in behavior set off alarm bells, making her friends and family worry that something terrible might have happened. As a result, they decided to call the police right away to investigate her disappearance. As the investigation into Zale's disappearance continued, the focus soon turned to her Tinder date, a 29-year-old IT engineer named Puriavirang Sundar. Sundar was a native of the island where Zale was vacationing and had matched with her on Tinder. There's some confusion about whether they had met before she arrived on the island or if they only connected after she got there, but what's clear is that Zale and Sundar did meet and share some time together, suggesting their relationship was more than just a casual encounter. Initially, authorities considered Sundar as just another potential witness in the case with no suspicion that he was involved in anything sinister. However, the investigation took a dramatic and unexpected turn when Sunder shockingly confessed to the crime as detectives dug deeper. They made a crucial discovery: blood was found inside Sunder's car. This piece of evidence became a key breakthrough, raising serious doubts about Sunder. With the evidence mounted against him, he eventually led the police to a significant location. He guided law enforcement to an area called Lamari, which is about a 25-minute drive from where Zale and her friend had been staying. It was there, in a shallow grave, that they found Zale's body. The scene was truly horrifying. Zale's body was discovered without clothes, and she had been brutally stabbed multiple times. The stab wounds were mainly around her chest and breasts, making it clear that this attack was no accident. It was a deliberate act of violence. However, the horror didn't stop there. Sunder's confession exposed even more shocking and gruesome details about what had happened. He admitted to not only killing Zale but also mutilating her body in a particularly gruesome act. He also cut out her tongue and a piece of her throat, intending to silence her so she couldn't scream for help. What makes this even more terrifying is the possibility that Zale might have still been alive when he did this. The thought of such cruelty is chilling. This terrible incident happened on August 22, which was only 5 days after Zale went missing. Sunder later explained that his motive for the murder was jealousy. Sunder claimed that Zale had been unfaithful, cheating on him with someone else. According to him, he had been planning to marry her, dreaming of a future where they would spend their lives together. In his mind, Ze was the person he wanted to build a forever with, a future filled with happiness, love and companionship. However, when Sunder allegedly discovered her infidelity, it broke him completely. Devastated and unable to cope with the betrayal, he sought a twisted form of revenge. In his confession, Sunder admitted to hatching a dark and cruel plan. He pretended to take Zale on what she thought would be a peaceful and enjoyable sightseeing trip. Little did she know Sunder had something far more sinister in mind. Instead of the pleasant day she expected, Zale was met with a nightmare. During what should have been a fun outing, Sunder attacked her with a knife, ending her life in a brutal and tragic way. It's important to note that Sunder's actions had nothing to do with love. Despite his claims of being heartbroken, his behavior went far beyond anything that could be justified by pain or heartbreak. His actions were not those of a man who had been wounded by love. They were the actions of someone deeply disturbed and dangerous. After this, local media revealed that detectives were still on the hunt for Zale's missing body parts and clothing. The discovery of her remains had shaken the island, but the investigation was far from over. Despite not having all the missing pieces, her loved ones held a funeral ceremony to honor her memory, allowing them to find some sense of closure before her remains could be returned to her home in Russia. The authorities suspect that Sunder had planned to dismember Zale's body completely. This horrifying intention adds an even more chilling layer to the crime. However, it seems something went wrong with his plan, leading him to hastily bury her body in a shallow makeshift grave on the island. Remember when Zale's family received those strange messages? It's possible that the suspect was behind them, although it's unclear if he sent them in English or used translation apps to communicate in Russian. It's evident that his efforts to cover up the crime were not enough. The scene he left behind was brutally clear about the premeditated nature of his actions. As authorities continue to search for the missing parts of Zale's body, they also hope to uncover more details that could explain the full extent of Sunder's evil intentions. The fact that he may have intended to further mutilate her is terrifying and only serves to highlight the depths of his disturbed mind. As of now, the case is still ongoing and Sunder is waiting for his trial. The authorities have him in custody and many hope that justice will be served. People want to see him held accountable for the horrible crime he committed. The hope is that he never walks free and spends the rest of his life in prison paying for the brutal murder of Zale. And to help make sense of the many questions surrounding this case, Retired police commander and host of the Profiling Evil podcast Mike King shared his thoughts. He explained that while we may never fully understand what went through Sunder's mind, there are warning signs that can help us avoid tragic situations like this in the future. Personally, from a criminologist perspective, it's absolutely more dangerous, and again, this is not an attack on the victim, and I hope everyone who's listening understands this is not about anything to do with shaming the victim. It's about risk reduction. King pointed out that meeting someone online can always be risky because you're dealing with an unknown person. When people connect online, they often feel safe because the interaction is virtual. However, meeting that person in real life can be a completely different story. In Zul's case, it's likely she trusted Sunder because she thought he was just another guy she met while on vacation. As King emphasized, it's crucial to reduce risk when meeting new people, especially in unfamiliar places. Going on a trip far away from home can be exciting, but it also adds multiple layers of dangers because you're not as familiar with your surroundings, the culture, or the people. But King's advice doesn't stop there. He goes on to emphasize the importance of taking precautionary measures when traveling, especially in unfamiliar places. According to him, it's crucial to be hyper-aware of your surroundings and the people you meet along the way. Simple things like sharing your location with someone you trust, having a buddy system, or making a plan if you get separated can be life-saving. In Zale's case, King highlights how something as basic as a phone app tracking her location could have made a difference. King also urges travelers to do their homework before embarking on a trip. One of the things that I often say when we travel, and we travel extensively with another couple throughout the world, and we make sure that we all have each other's phones on our phones so that we can go to the location they are, and if we decide to split up for the day, we say, I'm going here and I'll be back at this time, and you have this sense of security and being able to look on your app and say, oh yeah, they're where they said they were, and if things go wrong, you have a breadcrumb trail to follow, which may have led to her discovery more quickly. If you ever find yourself in a dangerous situation, the last thing you want is to be at a loss, unable to communicate, or not knowing who to turn to for help. Reaching out to your country's embassy or State Department should be your first move, as they can offer critical support, including translation services and investigative assistance. These connections can prove invaluable when you're in a foreign land far from home. But King didn't stop there. He also delves into the suspect's motives and provides chilling insights. Now, his expertise doesn't just come from studying cases like Zale's. Having dealt with predatory behavior for decades, he knows the minds of people like Sundar better than most. The suspect's claim that he cut out Zelia's tongue to keep her from screaming is quickly dismissed by King as a cover-up for a darker, more sinister intent. The tongue doesn't produce the scream, he points out. It's the lungs, the vocal cords. She could still have made noises of pain and suffering, so why would Sundar remove her tongue? King dives deep into the possible reasons. Historically, cutting out someone's tongue has often been used as a punishment for betrayal. In Sundar's mind, Zale's alleged affair could have felt like a personal betrayal, leading him to act out in a fit of rage. King suggests that this wasn't just about silencing her, but about punishing her in the most brutal, symbolic way possible. But beyond the historical and cultural implications, there's another disturbing layer to the crime: the possibility that Sundar acted out a long-held fantasy. Many predators, King explains, spend years fantasizing about violent acts before they eventually carry them out. In Sundar's case, removing Zul's tongue could have been part of a fantasy he had built up in his mind over time. This predatory behavior, King notes, is terrifying because it often spirals out of control, leading to the horrific crimes we see in cases like this. Another thing that King would love us to take note of is the way Zale's body was found, which provides crucial clues about the suspect's behavior. The fact that she was stripped of her clothes and buried in a shallow grave suggests a disturbing pattern. King believes this isn't just a straightforward murder, but the act of a disorganized predator acting on a sexually driven fantasy. King points out that if Zale had been left exposed and posed, it would have signaled a deliberate message from the predator. However, since she was buried, it complicates the situation. The choice of a burial site near a residential area rather than a secluded spot shows a lack of careful planning. Additionally, King highlights the missing clothing. Investigators search for it not just for physical evidence but to understand the sequence of events. Was the clothing removed as part of a ritual or symbolic act? King notes that these details can offer insights into the predator's mindset. How the clothing is treated can reveal a lot about what the perpetrator was thinking. Now King shifts to the motive behind the murder. The suspect's rage seems to stem from Zale stepping out of their relationship, but King questions how someone could get so enraged over a short-term romance. They hadn't been together long, just a vacation romance. He points out it's hard to believe that someone would react with such violence over a brief affair. King considers the possibility that the suspect may have had other motives beyond just a lover's quarrel. Perhaps he was looking for someone to target and Zale was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. This theory raises the question of whether investigators should look into other unsolved crimes on the island to see if the suspect could be linked to them. Additionally, he must have known that Zale was set to go to Madagascar on September 1st, making it clear that their Tinder relationship was only temporary. Now, for years we've seen troubling cases like this unfold, highlighting the dangers of meeting people online. One tragic case occurred in 2016 involving Ingrid Line, a nurse and mother of 3 from Seattle, Washington. Ingrid was killed and dismembered by John Robert Charlton, a man she had met through an online dating site. The following year, Sydney Loff, a 24-year-old from Nebraska, was lured into a date with Bailey Boswell and her boyfriend Aubrey Trail. What started as a seemingly innocent meetup turned horrifying. They brutally strangled Sydney and dismembered her, leaving a chilling reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind a digital profile. Then just a year later, another Tinder date case shocked the world. Grace Mullane, a British backpacker, was exploring New Zealand when she matched with Jesse Shane Kempson on Tinder. Tragically, just before her 22nd birthday, Grace was murdered. What makes this case even more shocking is what happened the very next day. While Grace's body was hidden away in a suitcase, Kempson, the man responsible, went back to Tinder. In the same year, another chilling case unfolded. Daniel Drayton, who was charged with the murder of Samantha Stewart in 2018, shocked everyone with his brutal actions. Samantha, a nurse from Queens, met Drayton through a dating app. After their meeting, Drayton allegedly committed a horrifying crime. He left Samantha naked and wrapped in a blanket with her teeth knocked out in her own bedroom. And Drayton didn't just face charges for this horrific murder, he was also hit with several additional charges: grand larceny, identity theft, possession of stolen property, and sexual misconduct. The case took an even darker turn when it was revealed that Drayton was a serial killer who used dating apps like Tinder to find his victims. So the next time you meet a Tinder date, remember these cases, and maybe let your friend know where you're going to be in case they do give you the creeps and you need to get out of there. Zale and the other victims were looking for companionship or maybe a long-term relationship, just like many people do. They didn't know who they were meeting and were seeking connection, but unfortunately they encountered people who were cruel and dangerous. In light of these tragic stories, if you ever have to choose between meeting someone you don't know well or staying safe, it's better to stay safe. Sometimes it's better to avoid potential risks rather than facing the unknown. Story 6 for County 911. Hi, yes, I need an ambulance. Hey, have you all checked to see if she's breathing? She's not moving one bit. She's not breathing. The deceased woman mentioned in this 911 call is Tama or Ford, a 40-year-old mother of 5. Forsyth County, Georgia, is a place haunted by its racist past. When Tama, the only black woman at an all-white adult sleepover, was found dead The inconsistencies in the case confused the entire nation. We began seeing corruption cover UPS, contradicting stories and evidence that was never taken into account. Today her grieving family still searches for answers. Was Tama's death a terrible accident or something far more sinister? Today's case is a mystery that refuses to be buried. Let's get started and see why this case still interests so many people. Today's video is sponsored by Aura, and it's a really important time to be talking about them because hackers may have stolen the social security numbers of every American. Over 2.9 billion records were stolen from National Public Data, which offers personal information to employers, private investigators, staffing agencies, and others doing background checks. These stolen records include a person's full name, address, date of birth, social security number, and phone number, along with alternate names and birth date. And members of the hacker group have reportedly released this information for free online. If you weren't taking precautions with your personal information online before, this should be a huge wake-up call. You've never been more vulnerable online than you are right now, but I'm not too worried about it because I use Aura. Aura alerts me if they find my phone number, email, or social security number on the dark web. They're going to let me know fast if anyone tries to use this information to access my credit or bank accounts. They give me up to $5 million in identity theft insurance should the worst case scenario happen. They also provide a bunch of other features to keep you safe online, all inside one app. You can go to my link aurora.com/into-the-deep to try 14 days for free. That will be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data is exposed. I highly recommend you do this right now because not only is National Public Data not going to do anything to help you, they probably aren't even going to face any repercussions for this leak. I'm not leaving myself and my family vulnerable to data breaches, and if you don't want to either, you can go to aurora.com/into-the-deep to try 2 weeks for free. Tamala George Horford was born on October 10, 1978 in Kingstown, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Everybody who knew her called her Tam for short. When she was 11 years old, her family moved to the Bronx, New York, but later in life Tama moved to Florida. There she met and married a man named Leander Horford. Leander already had a daughter when they met, but together Tama and Leander had 5 more children, all boys. The people around her said that Tama was a great mom and wife. She had a fun personality, loved to dance, and was very lively. You could often see her cheering for her boys at their football games with a bullhorn, and her kids could always count on her to be there for them. In 2013, Tama and her family moved to Georgia. Leander's job was the reason for the move. The county they moved to, Forsyth County, had a troubled history with race relations. Back in 1912, over 1,000 black residents were forcefully expelled from the town. Today, Forsyth County is 96% white, and it is still considered by some to be a sundown town. That is a white community that intentionally prevents black people and other minorities from residing there. On November 3, 2018, Tama made dinner for her husband and children. After dinner, she left to go to a birthday party for her new friend Jane Myers. Jane invited a group of moms she knew from the Youth Football League, and the plan was for everyone to spend the night so no one would drive home after drinking. Keep in mind that Tamlin knew some of the women at the party, but not very well, so she wasn't entirely sure about going there at first. She barely even knew Jane, but she decided to go anyway, only because she didn't want to let Jane down. Little did Tama know this decision would lead to her demise. Tama arrived at the party around 8:30 p.m. She brought a small overnight bag and a bottle of tequila as a gift for Jane, but it turned out that Jane didn't like tequila and didn't want the bottle. None of the other women at the party wanted any tequila either, so Tama ended up drinking the tequila herself while the other women had different drinks. Now the party was supposed to be just for women, but Jane's boyfriend Jose Barrera and another woman's husband Tom Smith decided to stay too while the women drank, talked and watched the LSU-Alabama football game upstairs in the living room. Jose and the other husband watched football in Jane's basement, so in total there were 9 women and 2 men at the party. And 8 of these people planned to spend the night. Tama was the only smoker at the party, so she often went outside to the porch to have a cigarette. She also smoked some marijuana that night. The host Gene teased her about this and said Tama was like a female Bob Marley. She also reminded Tama that her boyfriend Jose worked for the court and didn't like marijuana use. 2 women left the party at 10:30 p.m. because they didn't have overnight babysitters around. Midnight, the rest of the group started playing a game called Cards Against Humanity in the living room. They played for about an hour because it was already very late. After the game, everyone started cleaning up and getting ready for bed. Around this time, Tamlado called her husband and older daughter. This would be the last time she ever spoke to her family. For some reason, she also decided she wanted to drive home. She thought she hadn't drank much and didn't want to stay overnight anymore. We don't know the exact reason why she changed her mind. The other women at the party tried to convince her to stay because they didn't want her to drive after drinking, so Tama stayed over to calm everyone's nerves. By 1:30 in the morning, most people had gone to bed. The party host Jean and her boyfriend Jose also went to bed around this time. When they left, Tama was still in the kitchen eating a bowl of gumbo, and she told them she was going to have another cigarette. Outside the next morning, Meline Lombardi, Jean's aunt who also lived there, looked out into the backyard while making her coffee when she saw something deeply upsetting. Tama was lying face down in the grass under the deck. Meline ran upstairs to tell Jean and Jose what she had seen, but before she did that, she decided to pray next to Tama's body before trying to help Tama or call for emergency help at 8:59 a.m. Someone finally called 911. "Okay, what's going on? We had people over last night when we were drinking. Most of us went to bed. One of them stayed on the balcony. She was drinking and we just went outside and she's laying face down in the backyard." Many people have noted the calm demeanor in the calls on the 911 call. You can hear Jose telling the operator that he sees a small cut on Tama's wrist. He said he doesn't know if Tama did this to herself or if someone else did it. "I'm completely not sure." "Okay, and that's the only blood that you would see?" "That's what I can see without moving her over. I haven't seen her face." "Do you know if she was suicidal at all?" "I have no clue. I've met her one other time. Like my girlfriend said, people were over last night. It was her birthday party. We're not the woman that we believed to be deceased, but it was my girlfriend's birthday party. Instead of having everybody go out, she had everyone stay in, and she was the last one I saw before everybody. I mean, everybody was typically put off to bed and she was the last one in the kitchen. She was just either waiting around for a ride or waiting until the morning." "Okay, how far is where she would have fell from? How far is the deck from the ground?" "I would probably say maybe 20 feet. "Okay, you know, 20 feet from where your feet would be on the railing. The railing itself is maybe 3.5–4 feet. "Okay." The police arrived at Jean's house at 9:07 a.m., but when they got there they said Tama was already dead. The police then called everyone who had been at the party the night before. In total they talked to 30 people. Doctors did an autopsy on Tama's body and they found that Tama had several strange injuries from being hit or falling. They also found that she had a lot of alcohol in her blood. Her blood alcohol level was 238, which is almost 3 times the legal limit allowed for driving. But even before the autopsy was concluded, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office started thinking Tama's death was just an accident. They thought she might have fallen from the outdoor deck on the second floor of the house. At first the police told Tama's husband Leander that Tama had tripped over some garden edging and fallen on the ground, leading to her death. Jean's aunt, who lives in the house, said she had stumbled over this edging before as well. Not only that, but the police also thought that because Tama had been drinking alcohol and smoking marijuana, she might have been confused or dizzy. All of these factors would make it more likely for her to fall. The police think Tama died around 1:57 in the morning. That's when the security system showed that the back door was opened and never closed again. On February 20, 2019, the police officially closed the case. They said Tama's death was an accident, but there are still many questions about what really happened to Tama that night. The officials said that Tama's injuries didn't look like someone had hurt her on purpose. They said it was a party. People were drinking. She was drinking. Most people at the party had gone to bed by then and she was alone on the deck. But Tama's husband didn't believe this. He said Tama could drink half a bottle of tequila and still dance in her high heels, so there was no way she was so drunk that she accidentally fell off the porch. About 2 weeks after Tama died, another party guest named Stacy Smith talked to the police. She also didn't think Tama could have fallen off the deck by accident. Stacy said she had been on that deck many times before and even tried to test if someone who was drunk could lean over the railing to throw up and fall, but no matter how she tried, she couldn't figure out how Tama could have gone over the railing. Stacy also said that Tama wasn't acting very drunk or sick that night, even though the tests showed she had a lot of alcohol in her blood. Photos and videos from the party showed Tama smiling and happy. Even though she was drinking tequila, she didn't seem very drunk in the pictures, videos, or what other people remembered. At first, Jean, who owned the house, was so sure that Tama didn't fall from the balcony that she posted about it on social media, but this changed when Tama's friend Michelle Graves started posting on social media too. Michelle said she thought people at the party knew more than they were telling because things about Tama's death just didn't make sense. Michelle told the media they're totally lying, they're not off the hook because this was not an accident. A few weeks later, some of the people who were at the party, including Jean, sued Michelle. They said Michelle had hurt their reputations with 13 Facebook posts. They claimed these posts falsely accused them of killing Tama or helping to cover it up, but Michelle said she only posted facts that she had checked in Tama's case file when Tama was found. Jean and Jose said she was lying face down with her arms by her sides and her palms facing up, but when the first responders arrived, Tama's position was different. Her left arm was stretched out and bent at the elbow with her fist closed tight. Her face wasn't turned to either side. It looked like she had fallen straight forward onto the ground. This position seemed very unnatural. Even the police officers who came to the scene were confused about how Tama's body was positioned. One officer said, if you try to catch yourself with your left hand and there's nothing to grab, you'd spin around. You know, it doesn't make sense. It's like she fell straight down. People also noticed several cuts and scrapes on Tama's hands and arms. Some wondered if these might be defensive wounds, which could mean Tama had been in a fight before she went over the balcony. Jose told an investigator on November 7 that he had checked Tama for a pulse, which might explain why her arm was moved, but later when talking to a special agent, Jose said this wasn't true. When the agent mentioned the earlier report, Jose called it complete __ and said he didn't move her arm or check for a pulse. Jose did tell the police that he found an unlit cigarette and a lighter on the deck before he saw Tama's body, but because the police thought Tama's death was just an accident, they didn't check these items for fingerprints. They also didn't protect the area where Tama was found, which means important evidence might have been lost or changed. In the first 911 call, Jose had said there were security cameras pointed at the backyard, but it turned out all the cameras had dead batteries and hadn't recorded anything. This detail seemed a little too convenient to some people. Tama's family and friends had other questions too. They wondered why nobody tried to do CPR on Tama when she was found. Even the police didn't try to help her. They told the ambulance not to come and Tama was just put in a body bag and taken away. It seemed like no one made any sort of last-ditch effort to try to save Tama's life. Many people wondered if Tama's race played a role in her death. She was the only black woman at a party full of white women. Some thought that if the situation had been reversed, if one white woman had died at a party with mostly black women, the police would have treated it as a crime scene right away. As we've mentioned before, the county where this happened, Forsyth County, has a bad history of racism. Fortunately, Tama's case became famous across the country and many people demanded justice for her. Many big celebrities including 50 Cent and T.I. said they didn't think Tama's death was just an accident. It wasn't until over 600,000 people signed a petition that Sheriff Freeman asked the Georgia Bureau of Investigations to look at Tama's case again. In July 2020, the police found more records of doors opening and closing around the time they think Tama died. The garage door opened at 1:40 a.m. and wasn't closed until the next morning. The last person who said they saw Tama alive, Bridget Fuller, told police that she and Tama walked to the front door together when Bridget's husband came to pick her up. Bridget said she hugged Tama before leaving. This matches a door chime at 1:47 a.m. but Bridget's husband said he only saw his wife at the door, not Tama. All these things that didn't add up made people very suspicious. In December 2018, Jose was fired from his job as a pretrial officer. This was because he used his job to look at documents about Tama's death that he wasn't supposed to see. People also said he leaked confidential information about her case, but Jose said he didn't do anything illegal and that all the information he looked at was public. Furthermore, when Tama's body was sent for an autopsy, only 5 photos were taken. This is very unusual for a death investigation. Normally many more photos would be taken, especially with the kind of injuries Tamla had. Tama's father thought this was because the police were focusing on investigating Tama herself, not looking for someone who might have hurt her. There were many questions that didn't make sense. How could Tama, who had a lot of alcohol in her system, still seem in control but somehow fall over a 14-feet railing? Why didn't anyone in the house hear her fall or scream? What happened when the door was opened just before 2 a.m. and why wasn't it closed until the next morning? For over a year, Tama's family fought to have her case looked at again. They didn't believe her death was an accident. They also asked for a second autopsy, but her family insists that narrative doesn't solve the puzzle. You get all this information and you go, wait, nothing makes sense here. Ralph Fernandez, the attorney for Tama's husband, says he's gone through the evidence, every interview document and seen photos. So as Tama's father and friends like Michelle Graves, why not just let this go? I cannot let this go because I know that what they said did not happen to her. In June 2020, the GBI finally conducted a second autopsy. They found that Tama had injuries to her head, neck, body and limbs. These included scrapes on her face, 4 types of bleeding in her skull and brain. Her right wrist was out of place, cuts on her arms and legs, a broken neck and a tear in the right side of her heart. The GBI also found that Tama had a lot of alcohol in her blood, just like the first autopsy showed, but they also found Xanax in her system and no one knew how it got there. Tama's family hired another medical expert for a third opinion. This expert said that Tama's wrist wasn't just out of place but had a compound fracture, meaning the bone was sticking out through the skin. I know this was a homicide. The problem is I can't pin it on anybody because I don't have a badge and I don't have a gun. This is important because there wasn't much blood found where Tama was discovered. This makes people wonder where and how she got this injury. The little blood that was found on Tama's sleeve was on the opposite side of her injury and seemed to have happened after she died. Interestingly, no medical examiner found any big injuries to Tama's skull and bones. The fact that there was no bruising on the broken bones in her skull makes people question whether she really died from falling from the second floor. When the police talked to everyone who was at the party, they got photos and videos from their phones, but they didn't take the phones or download all the data. They also didn't legally request to look at the partygoers' phones for evidence. This didn't happen until the GBI got involved. By then at least 2 people had new phones, and detectives found out that some text messages and pictures on some of the phones had been deleted during their investigation. The GBI found what seemed to be lies from some people who were at the party. One woman, Bridget Fuller, who had severe anxiety, told police her medication made it impossible for her to lie. This claim is unusual as there's no known medication that prevents lying. Bridget said she always wore a necklace with her Xanax because she depended on it so much. She told investigators she knew it was a controlled substance and hadn't shared it, but when the GBI looked at everyone's phone messages they found this wasn't true. Bridget had shared some kind of medication with a few people before the party, and she gave some women Xanax at the party. When asked about this, Bridget admitted it was true but said she didn't give any to Tama because she didn't know her well. However, Tama had Xanax in her system and no one knew why. It's worth noting that Bridget didn't seem to like Tama much, and it appeared none of the women really did. One of the main detectives on Tama's case, Michael Christian, left the police department during an internal investigation. The investigation found he had broken his oath of office and neglected his duty. The GBI talked to 2 women who said Michael Christian had told them details about Tama's case. One ex-girlfriend said he shared Tama's toxicology report with her and thought Tama's body had been moved. Another woman said Michael sent her a photo of Tama's body at the scene. This woman said Michael was so obsessed with the case that he would have panic attacks about it. According to the ex-girlfriend, Michael thought Tama's death was an accident but didn't think she fell from a 14th balcony. She also said Michael told her he found calls between Jose Barrera and the lead investigator Andy Callan before the 911 call, and he thought maybe Andy helped the partygoers come up with a story, but Jose and Andy both said this wasn't true. The GBI got 3 screenshots of Snapchat messages Michael sent to a girlfriend. In one message sent the day Tama was found dead, he seemed to be joking about talking to Tama's husband. The message was very insensitive, making light of Tama's death and her children's loss. Michael even called Tama the porch lady at one point. In another message, Michael made disturbing jokes about racism and murder. Cover UPS. The Horford family's lawyer thinks part of this message might be referring to Tama's friend Michelle Graves. When the GBI asked Michael about these messages, he admitted sending them but said they were sarcasm and in bad taste. He denied ever sending photos of the crime scene. A friend of Tama's husband, Stephen Reynolds, told police he was worried Tama's death might have been sexually motivated. He claimed that 2 couples at the party were swingers and thought someone might have tried to initiate something sexual with Tama. However, this idea wasn't mentioned anywhere else in the investigation, including in interviews with the couple Stephen named. Instead, the GBI seemed to focus a lot on Tama's husband Leander. They searched his phone and social media accounts but didn't find anything suspicious. On July 28, 2021, the GBI finished their investigation. They decided not to pursue any criminal charges. This means Tama's death is still officially considered an accident and no one has been arrested or charged. The most heartbreaking part of this story comes from Leander's experience at the funeral home. When he went to see Tama before the funeral, he couldn't even recognize her. Here's what he said: "When I went into the funeral home, I probably scared everyone because I yelled 'What the fuck?' as loud as I could. I saw my wife looking like she had black shoe polish all over her face. I flipped out and told them to take it off. They said they had to cover up the bruising, but you don't cover bruising with black shoe polish. My wife is my color, but her skin was so dark like blackface. I was really angry and was going to close the casket for the viewing. Leander's sons wanted to see their mother, but he was worried about how it would affect them. His oldest son insisted, so Leander let him come in. Leander said, "We both just stood there and looked at her. Neither of us cried because it didn't look anything like her. He described how Tama's wrist was bent oddly and you could see where the bone had stuck out. When his son came in, the boy said, "Dad, that doesn't look like an accident." This made Leander decide to leave the casket open, saying, "If a 12-year-old can walk up and say it doesn't look like an accident, leave the casket open." Tama Horsford's funeral was held at MacDonald and Son Funeral Home in _ Georgia on Friday, November 9, 2018. Story 6. By all accounts, Lindsay Musgrove was a kind and caring person who graduated with a biology degree from Quinnipiac University in 2012. 2 years later, she earned her nursing license and studied at Massachusetts General Hospital Institute of Health Professions. Lindsay dedicated her life to helping others as a labor and delivery nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital. Lindsay quickly established herself as a consummate caregiver, and her colleagues loved to work with her, known for her attention to detail and compassion. Lindsay's patients requested her as their preferred nurse for future deliveries. Her ability to soothe nervous parents and guide them through labor was remarkable. In 2016, Lindsay married Patrick Clancy, a computer software engineer. Just 1 year after their marriage, Lindsay and Patrick welcomed their daughter Cora. Cora was a loving and caring older sister who dreamed of becoming a doctor and a mommy. Dawson, their second child, born in 2019, was a bright and charismatic boy. His laughter and infectious smile lit up every room he entered. In 2022, Lindsay gave birth to Ken. Ken was a happy and easygoing child. He was often referred to as Happy Callan by his mom and dad. Lindsay, Patrick and their children lived in a beautiful house in Dewberry, Massachusetts. The house, purchased for $500,000, had everything they could have asked for. Their backyard was adorned with a white picket fence and a playground, creating the perfect setting for an American dream home to their friends and family. Lindsay and Patrick had what many would consider a perfect marriage. The couple rarely fought, and their unwavering affection for each other was evident in the way they exchanged "I love you" several times a day. They were the epitome of a loving couple, radiating happiness and contentment. Patrick was a loving and dedicated father to Cora, Dawson and Ken. Their bond was unbreakable. He was always in the backyard, engaging in playful activities with his 3 children. There was nothing more important to Lindsay than Cora, Dawson and Ken. She loved being a mother and believed that raising children was the most rewarding and fulfilling thing a person could do with their life. Pictures of her children filled the walls of her home, and she constantly shared images of them on social media. She would write posts expressing her gratitude and joy, such as, "I feel like the luckiest mama in the world and so unbelievably thankful for this family and life." Those who knew Lindsay attested to her dedication as a mother, describing her as someone who would leave parties early to return home to her babies. She truly hated hearing them cry, even when sleep training them. Lindsay's commitment to her children was evident in every aspect of her relationship. After the birth of Cora and Dawson, Lindsay's emotions became overwhelming. The weight of motherhood proved to be a significant challenge for her, and she struggled to navigate the complicated waters of motherhood. However, she declared on Facebook that her experience with motherhood with Ken was going more smoothly as she was focused on exercise, nutrition and rest. She was taking proactive steps to address her emotional well-being. However, as time went on, Lindsay started to experience anxiety about returning to work after her maternity leave. The pressure of being a full-time mother and balancing her career became overwhelming for her. She sought solace in various forms of therapy, including visits to multiple psyches and being prescribed a range of medications. By September 2022, Lindsay's anxiety levels had reached an all-time high. In search of relief, she decided to seek further help. She went for an evaluation at the Women and Infant Center for Women's Behavioral Health in Providence. Unfortunately, she was not diagnosed with postpartum depression. During this visit on January 1, 2023, she confessed to her husband Patrick that she had thoughts of harming herself and her children. Alarmed and concerned Lindsay to seek help and admitted herself to the Mann Hospital for mental health treatment. She would spend the next 5 days in the hospital receiving the necessary care. When Lindsay was discharged from a clean hospital, the doctors determined that the young woman posed no danger to herself or others. However, no one knew the true extent of her struggles. Throughout January, Lindsay appeared to be getting better. Her family went on several outings to museums and restaurants, and Lindsay herself expressed that she no longer had thoughts of harming herself. Even her mother noticed a change in her text messages as her tone appeared more upbeat. However, no one knew that Lindsay was battling her own demons beneath the surface. On January 24, 2023, those demons finally took a terrible toll on this day. Lindsay's true thoughts and feelings came to light in the most devastating manner. January 23, 2023 began as a regular day for the Clancy family. As the morning progressed, Lindsay took the children to the doctor for a checkup. Her daughter Cora was scheduled for a routine examination with her pediatrician. Upon their return home, Lindsay spent quality time with her children, enjoying an afternoon of play in the snow. Taking the opportunity to capture these moments, she snapped a few pictures and shared them with her husband Patrick and her mother. The happy scene painted a seemingly normal picture of family life. On that fateful day, Patrick was working from home in the basement around 4 p.m. After Lindsay and the children came inside from playing in the snow, she Googled kids Miralax. She also used Apple Maps to calculate how long it would take for someone to drive to the 3V restaurant near Kingston. Lindsay also searched the CVS website called the CVS in Kingston and asked if they had children Miralax. She then texted Patrick in the basement office and said, "Any chance you want to do takeout from the 3V? I didn't cook anything, it's been a long day." Although 3V was a bit out of the way for Lindsay and Patrick to eat from, there were closer restaurants they had ordered from. Before Patrick informed Lindsay that he agreed to check the menu and select what he wanted to eat, he chose the scallop and pork belly risotto, while Lindsay opted for the Mediterranean power bowl. At 5:10 p.m. Lindsay called the 3V to place the order and mentioned Patrick as the designated pickup person. At 5:15 p.m. Patrick left the home and Lindsay sent him a text message as a reminder to pick up the children's medications at the CVS. CCTV footage showed that Patrick arrived at the CVS at 5:32 p.m. However, he did not receive an answer during his attempt to ask about the brand Lindsay preferred. 1 minute later, at 5:34 p.m., Lindsay finally returned Patrick's phone call, which lasted for 14 minutes. Although the conversation seemed normal, Patrick later shared that he sensed that Lindsay was in the midst of doing something while talking to him. It was chilly outside as Patrick arrived home at 6 p.m. after stopping to pick up dinner and medication at CVS. As Patrick pulled into his driveway and entered his home, he noticed an eerie silence that hung in the air. The usually bustling house was unusually quiet, and the absence of the family sounds of his 3 children and wife Lindsay was unsettling. Panic began to settle in Patrick's mind as he searched for any signs of life in his home. Lindsay and his children Cora, Dawson and Ken were nowhere to be found. His heart raced with worry as he called Lindsay's cell phone at 6:09 p.m. hoping to hear her voice on the other end of the line. Unfortunately, there was no response. With growing concern, Patrick made his way up the stairs to the master bedroom. The silence was deafening, and each step he took echoed through the empty house. As he approached the door, he noticed it was locked, which was even more unsettling as Lindsay had never locked herself in the bedroom before. Patrick turned the knob, but it wouldn't budge. He exerted more force, but the stubborn lock refused to give way. Desperate to find his wife, Patrick resorted to pounding on the door, hoping to elicit a response. All he received in return was silence. Frustrated but determined, Patrick continued to struggle With the locked bedroom door, after what seemed like an eternity, he managed to force it open, revealing a scene that would be etched in his memory forever. Blood stained the floor and windowsill, and a bloody knife lay ominously on Lindsay's bedside table. The sight sent a shiver down Patrick's spine as he immediately recognized something unspeakable had happened inside the room. Walking toward the bloody windowsill, Patrick peered outside and saw his wife, Lindsay, lying on the ground in the backyard, his heart pounding with fear. Patrick frantically dialed 911 as he ran down the stairs and outside to Lindsay. Patrick found Lindsay lying face up in the backyard, her body soaked in blood. Slashes were visible on both her neck and wrists. Lindsay was conscious but barely responsive. Panic washed over Patrick as he desperately tried to make sense of the situation. "What have you done?" he asked, his voice trembling with fear. In an eerie and detached voice, Lindsay replied that she had attempted to take her own life and jumped out the window. As Patrick's mind raced, filled with confusion and concern for the welfare of their children, he had to ask the unthinkable: where were the 3 young children? Lindsay coldly replied, "In the basement." Patrick remained outside with Lindsay until the police and paramedics arrived, staying on the phone with the 911 dispatcher the entire time. The dispatcher could hear the tension in Patrick's voice as he relayed the grim situation and stayed by his wife's side. The paramedics quickly arrived on the scene and began assessing Lindsay's condition. They worked tirelessly to stabilize her and provide any necessary medical attention. Meanwhile, Patrick's thoughts were consumed by the well-being of his children. With the paramedics preoccupied with Lindsay, Patrick decided to search for his children. While still on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, Patrick walked back into their home, his heart pounding with fear. He descended the staircase into the basement where Lindsay had said their children were. With every step he called out, "Guys," hoping that they would respond to him, but there was no response. As Patrick reached the bottom of the staircase, the atmosphere grew tense and forbidding. The silence was deafening and a sense of dread filled the air. Suddenly, the dispatcher on the end of the line heard a scream, as if someone or something was in agony. Upon entering the basement, Patrick discovered his 3 children, Cora, Callan and Dawson, lying unconscious on the floor. Each child had an exercise band tightly wrapped around their neck. As panic set in, Patrick immediately called for help. Patrick begged his children to wake up and breathe. His voice filled with desperation, he screamed for the police officers upstairs assisting his wife Lindsay. In a matter of minutes, the officers descended the stairs and witnessed a horrific sight. 3 innocent children, unconscious and unresponsive, lay lifeless on the cold floor. In the midst of the chaos and turmoil, Patrick uttered the words, "She killed the kids," referring to his wife Lindsay. With each word, his desperation turned to anguish as he realized the extent of his wife's unimaginable act. Cora, his 5-year-old daughter, and Dawson, his 3-year-old son, were pronounced dead at the scene. Baby Ken, just 7 months old, was still alive, but his injuries were severe. Despite the efforts of the medical team, the infant succumbed to his injuries several days later in the hospital, with his father by his side holding him in his arms as he took his final breaths. The tragic events that unfolded in less than 20 minutes had shattered Patrick's world, leaving him grief-stricken and desperate for answers. Lindsay, in the meantime, was taken to Boston's Children's Hospital to be treated for the injuries she sustained when she jumped out of the window and fell 20 feet in an attempt to take her own life. She was charged with 3 counts of murder, 3 counts of strangulation or suffocation, and 3 counts of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. Days after the horrific events unfolded, Patrick Clancy expressed his feelings on a GoFundMe page created for him and his family. Despite the unimaginable pain and shock, he displayed love and forgiveness for his wife. However, he admitted that the shock and pain of the entire ordeal were relentless, leaving his family in a state of profound grief. The GoFundMe campaign, established to cover the expenses associated with Cora Dawson and Callum's funeral, received generous Support from the public. However, many individuals expressed that they were effectively funding Lindsay's defense by contributing to the campaign. The statement sparked controversy and raised concerns about the potential misuse of funds. Lindsay's attorneys later clarified that their legal fees were not paid through the GoFundMe campaign. Instead, her parents were responsible for covering these expenses. Despite the controversy surrounding the GoFundMe campaign, it managed to raise over $1 million. However, as of this time, the campaign is no longer accepting donations as it reached its goal. During a brief hearing held on February 3, 2023, in Plymouth District Court, a judge granted a request by Lindsay's attorney for the police to waive security rules at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, where Lindsay was a patient. The request was made to allow the examination of Lindsay by a forensic psychiatrist to access her for symptoms of postpartum depression. Lindsay's attorneys argued that her self-inflicted injuries had left her movement extremely limited and she posed no threat to anyone. Lindsay's attorney further contended that Lindsay was subject to a horrific over-medication of prescription drugs. Among the medications listed by her attorney were Klonopin, Valium, Ativan, Zoloft, amitriptyline, mirtazapine, Prozac, mood stabilizers such as Lamed and Seractuil, as well as parenhydroxazine and Ambient. She had been prescribed a total of 13 medications within 4 months for the treatment of mood disorders, anxiety and psychosis. According to Lindsay's attorneys, one of the side effects of over-medication on these drugs was suicidal and homicidal intentions. The attorney believed that a thorough examination by a forensic psychiatrist was necessary to determine the extent of her symptoms and the potential risks associated with her medication regimen. The Plymouth County prosecutor painted a vivid picture of her actions, alleging that she acted with extreme atrocity and cruelty, challenging the defense's assertion that her postpartum mental condition and prescription medication played a role in her homicidal acts. During the court proceedings, Lindsay sat silently in a hospital room, watching intently through a monitor as the details of this tragic case unfolded in court. A not guilty plea was entered on behalf of Lindsay when Lindsay Clancy committed the heinous act of murdering her 3 children. She committed filicide, the deliberate act of killing one's offspring. According to Dr. Philip Resnick, a psychiatrist who specializes in the area of filicide, there are 5 primary reasons why a parent would commit filicide. One surprising motive behind filicide is a sense of altruism. In some cases, parents may feel that by ending their child's life they are sparing them suffering or preventing a tragic future. This motive is difficult to understand and comprehend as it flies in the face of natural parental instincts to protect and nurture. Another potential reason for filicide is acute psychosis with mental health disorders like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. People may experience delusions or hallucinations that lead them to perceive their children as threats or sources of harm. In these cases, the person's perception of reality becomes distorted and they may believe they are saving their child from harm. In some cases, parents may have second thoughts or regrets about having a child. They may harbor disappointment, frustration, or even hatred towards their children. This sentiment can escalate to the point where the parent feels compelled to take drastic measures to eliminate the child. Physical abuse can be a catalyst for filicide. When parents subject their children to severe or ongoing physical abuse, it can create a toxic environment where the child becomes the victim and the parent becomes the perpetrator. In the most severe cases, the parent may feel a sense of relief or release after physically harming their child, leading to the ultimate act of filicide. Filicide can also arise in the context of spousal revenge. In instances where one parent feels betrayed, abandoned, or abused by the other, they may turn their anger towards their child by harming or their child. They may seek revenge or exert control over their partner, demonstrating the depths of their despair and frustration. The shocking tragedy raised questions about the connection between postpartum depression, PPD, psychosis, and Homicidal behavior. Lindsay's attorneys argued that a combination of postpartum psychosis and overmed medication were to blame for her actions after childbirth. The levels of hormones in a woman's body drop quickly, leading to chemical changes in the brain and mood swings. This natural process known as the postpartum period can cause feelings of overwhelm, loss of energy, intrusive thoughts of harming oneself or the baby, loss of sleep, and a variety of other physical and emotional challenges. However, postpartum psychosis is a far more severe and dangerous condition that affects the mother's sense of reality. This condition affects approximately 1 to 2 of every 1,000 deliveries and is characterized by a sudden and severe loss of sanity. Symptoms may include delusions, hallucinations, paranoia, rapid mood swings, and disorganized thinking. During the investigation into the murder of Lindsay Clancy's 3 children, a diary entry was discovered on her phone dated October 25, 2022. This journal entry, written months before the heinous crime, revealed distressing insights into her state of mind in the days leading up to the killings. In the diary entry, Lindsay expressed frustration and resentment towards her children, specifically Cora and Dawson. Lindsay wrote that sometimes she resented them because they prevented her from treating their infant son Ken like her first child. She expressed her discontentment when Ka and Dawson returned from preschool, stating that their bad blood seemed to rub off on her. According to Lindsay, she felt depressed and her emotions were affecting her children. Additionally, the detectives discovered that just 4 days before the killings, Lindsay conducted a search on her phone that read, "Can you treat a sociopath?" She also looked up ways to kill on her mobile device. The revelation that Lindsay harbored resentment towards her children and sought information on how to carry out such a heinous crime was deeply disturbing. During an arraignment in October 2023, it was revealed during the arraignment that toxicology reports had revealed the presence of certain medications in Lindsay's system. The reports indicated that she had been prescribed antidepressants, antipsychotics, sedatives, and an anticonvulsant, all of which were found to have reached therapeutic levels. The prosecution's case focused on proving that Lindsay had premeditated the murders and carried out a deliberate act of violence. They argued that the presence of medication in her system played no role in her actions, as she had already made the decision to kill her children. Further, the timing and level of the medications further supported their theory that Lindsay had acted with a clear mind and without any impairment caused by medication. In 2024, Patrick Clancy completed the Boston Marathon in his children's names, raising funds for the Boston Children's Hospital. During this time, Lindsay, who is facing trial for the murder of her children, remains committed to her treatment at the Tewksbury Hospital. She is currently described as permanently paralyzed. As the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper, thank you for joining me here at MR Nightcare True Crime Stories. Remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep, and until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.